Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Karen Oviedo. Rolando Angel Aquino was born in 1987 in Bolivia. As the eldest of 7 siblings, he learned the importance of family bonds and hard work from an early age. He dreamed of having a happy family filled with the joy and laughter of children. In his youth, he met Carolina Chavez and she bore him a son. Even though they divorced, they still maintained a good relationship. Then Soledad Gardio entered his life and they had another son named Elias. Although the relationship with Soledad did not last long, Rolando remained a devoted and caring father to his children. He still kept in touch and maintained warm relationships with Carolina and Soledad. From an early age, Rolando was very active and passionate about sports, including football, and he played for a local team. Friends and family described him as kind and very hardworking. He got along well with his neighbors and was known for being exceptionally sociable. During a local soccer match, Rolando was attracted to Karen. Rolando and Karen soon developed a romance. A chance meeting led to true happiness. In 2016, Rolando and Karen lived together and opened a business at home. Karen was born on March 30, 1990, and grew up in Manado. Famous for being extroverted and open-minded, Karen always wanted to have a happy family. Before meeting Rolando, she married Rul, and then she and Rul had 2 beautiful daughters. However, over time, their marriage began to deteriorate. Financial difficulties were the main cause of their arguments, and they soon divorced. Rolando and Karen's lives passed peacefully, but a tragedy occurred. In the summer of 2019, Rolando's son, 9-year-old Elias, came to Rolando's house to visit him in the afternoon. That evening was filled with laughter from Elias, Rolando, and even Karen. However, the next morning, July 12, 2019, Rolando noticed that Elias was not feeling well. Rolando quickly contacted the family of his ex-wife, Soledad, and quickly took his son to the children's hospital. When Elias was transported to the hospital, pediatricians realized that Elias's condition was critical, requiring immediate transfer to the intensive care unit. Despite the efforts of medical staff, Elias died shortly after arriving at the hospital. What was puzzling was that Elias arrived at his father's house in completely normal health. Medical reports revealed that Elias died of third-degree poisoning, leading to multiple organ failure and cerebral thrombosis. This left Rolando and his ex-wife, Soledad, completely devastated. Doctors recommended additional forensic examinations. However, Soledad and Elias's grandmother refused the procedure. Karen then offered to cremate the boy's body, but Soledad instead chose to bury him in a private cemetery. Elias's death left Rolando completely anguished. He was greatly saddened by the sudden passing of his youngest son. Karen, caring and loving, was always by Rolando's side. She arranged everything, supported her boyfriend, and helped him overcome his pain and grief. Over time, with Karen's warmth and care, Rolando's pain began to ease. 16 months later, Rolando proposed to Karen. They got married, and Rolando believed that she would always be with him. However, their happiness was short-lived. Karen's life took a different turn on February 6, 2022, when she returned home from a gym session to find her husband Rolando extremely unwell. The next day, a medical ambulance was seen outside their home. 35-year-old Rolando had collapsed in the living room after vomiting violently. Emergency medical services quickly arrived, and Rolando was taken to Santa Maria Clinic. The medical team's efforts to save Rolando were ultimately unsuccessful. Rolando died on February 9 from severe poisoning. When medical staff began questioning Karen, they learned that Rolando had been taking medication for skin discoloration. However, this information only increased their suspicions. Closer examination of Rolando's body revealed an overdose of calcium oxalate crystals, which were often a sign of ethylene glycol poisoning, commonly used in automotive antifreeze. This mysterious and unexpected death led to an investigation into Rolando's death, and the authorities were determined to get to the bottom of it. The prosecutor's office questioned Rolando and Karen's neighbors, who revealed that Karen had repeatedly given her husband an unknown drug. Although Karen initially claimed it was a cure for Rolando's skin blemishes, neighbors remained suspicious, which led investigators to look into Karen. During the investigation, Karen was thoroughly questioned about the events surrounding her husband's death. Many conflicts arose during her interrogation. When asked about the substance she gave her husband before he died, Karen confirmed that it was a medicine to treat dark spots on her skin that she used through an intravenous infusion. However, she could not provide the potion because the housekeeper had thrown it away. Further investigation led to an interview with the housekeeper, Claudia Cortez, who contradicted Karen's statement about the disposal of the jar. Claudia also said she overheard a conversation between the couple in which Rolando expressed dissatisfaction with the medication he was taking. As a result, Karen was detained by the police and her cell phone was confiscated for further investigation. Rolando's sudden death shocked his family, friends, and teammates. Rolando's ex-wife, Karen's ex-husband, was especially stunned by rumors that Rolando's death might have been an act of intentional poisoning. Further investigation revealed disturbing evidence. A search of Karen's phone revealed she had researched the most dangerous toxins online and had found a way to delete her search history. Additionally, records showed she had ordered ethylene glycol, a toxic substance used in the manufacture of antifreeze, from an online store on 2 separate occasions. This substance is odorless, has a sweet taste, and is extremely dangerous to humans. Based on preliminary forensic results and collected evidence, the prosecutor's office charged Karen with intentionally poisoning Rolando. It is believed that she mixed the toxic substance with the orange juice that Rolando drank, causing his health to seriously decline and ultimately leading to his death. By mid-February, evidence against Karen had been collected, and Karen had been charged with capital murder. At the same time, investigators had begun looking into suspicious circumstances surrounding the death of 9-year-old Elias. A thorough investigation into Elias' medical history had been initiated by the prosecutor's office. According to the boy's mother, Elias had been in good health until he suddenly fell into a coma at his father's house and never recovered. Elias's death certificate had stated that his body had suffered from cerebral thrombosis. However, investigators had found this explanation suspicious, especially since Elias had been young and he had been in good health. As part of the investigation, the prosecutor's office had requested information about any purchases of ethylene glycol. Karen had been found to have purchased the poison on July 2, 2019, just before Elias had arrived at Aquino's residence. Relatives of Elias had also provided valuable information, revealing that Karen had urged the boy's body to be cremated, but his biological mother had instead chosen a traditional burial. These findings had been enough for prosecutor Claudia Rios to file more serious murder charges against Karen, accusing her of poisoning Elias. A judge had then ordered Karen detained pending trial on March 14. After she had tried to appeal the decision, the judge had overruled her, concluding that Karen would have to remain in detention until the trial began. Karen's highly publicized trial had begun on November 28, 2022, at Mendoza Criminal Court, attracting widespread public and media attention. 2 separate indictments had been pending against Karen, one for the murder of Elias, headed by prosecutor Fernando Gudo, and another for the murder of Rolando, headed by Claudia Rios. During the trial, Javier Aquino, Rolando's 15-year-old son, had appeared as the plaintiff, along with his lawyer. Prosecutor Fernando had presented the case, accusing Karen of poisoning Elias and Rolando by mixing ethylene glycol with orange juice, leading to severe poisoning and death. Karen's defense team had disputed the charges, claiming Rolando had a history of violence and abuse of their client. They had asserted that there had been no reliable evidence to support the allegations and that Karen had had no motive for murder. The defense had questioned why Karen would have killed Elias, who had posed no threat to her. They had also pointed out that Karen had been the sole owner of the house, car, and business and that she had not made any suspicious purchases using her phone. Furthermore, the defense had argued that if Karen had used ethylene glycol to poison Elias, as the prosecutor had claimed, then her search for information about the poison on the internet would have made no sense. The defense had emphasized that although the deaths of Rolando and Elias had been heinous crimes, it had been necessary to clearly prove Karen's guilt before prosecuting her. Karen's defense team had tried to claim the allegations against her had been false. Karen had said that Rolando had bought the antifreeze by hacking into her account, instead of buying it herself. Additionally, Karen had claimed to have had an alibi for the day her husband had been poisoned on February 6, saying she had not been home when he had first shown symptoms. As the trial had continued, the prosecution had asked Karen a number of questions. An important point addressed by Prosecutor Fernando had been whether Karen had offered to cremate her deceased son, Rolando. Karen had firmly replied that she had had no say in the matter and had never suggested cremation. The prosecution presented relatives of Rolando as witnesses to provide more insight into the events surrounding the death. Elias's mother, Soledad, testified that after her son's death, Rolando told her that Karen had suggested cremating Elias's body so both families could keep his ashes. However, Soledad refused this idea. She also shared her memories of meeting Rolando at the cemetery, where he mentioned Karen's jealousy. According to Soledad, Karen's jealousy was so intense that she and Rolando slept in separate beds. Another witness, Carolina, the mother of Rolando's first child, confirmed that Rolando and Karen slept separately, as her ex-husband had told her. Although Carolina had not interacted with Karen before the incident, Karen called her on the morning of February 8 to inform her that Rolando was in the hospital due to illness. Karen claimed that Rolando had probably taken some medication and was feeling unwell. She also asked Carolina to help her unlock Rolando's cell phone, suspecting that he was having an affair. Carolina was shocked to hear about Rolando's condition, as they had met just a few days prior and he seemed fine. After speaking with Karen, Carolina learned that Rolando had taken medication for skin blemishes, which caused an allergic reaction. The trial continued with doctors and experts presenting crucial forensic evidence and the results of a psychological examination to the jury. This new information shed light on previously overlooked details. Dr. Ivana Marinelli, a pediatrician who treated Elias in July 2019, explained how the boy was rushed to the hospital with severe breathing difficulties and required immediate intubation. A CT scan revealed a deep cerebral thrombosis, and Elias received intensive care. Dr. Ivana confirmed that Elias's symptoms were consistent with ethylene glycol poisoning, including impaired consciousness, restlessness, and a coma accompanied by a blood clotting disorder. The jury also reviewed the results of Karen's psychological examination, which was conducted at the prosecution's request. The experts found that Karen had lied and concealed the truth. The examination revealed that Karen showed no emotional response to her husband's death, raising doubts about her sincerity. The prosecutor questioned whether Karen had truly been a victim of domestic violence as she had claimed in her statement. This information provided insight into Karen's psychological profile. After weeks of waiting and many court hearings, the trial was finally over. The jury delivered a unanimous verdict after a lengthy period of silence and anticipation. Karen was found guilty of murdering Elias with exceptional cruelty and of causing Rolando's death through a particularly heinous process. As a result, she was sentenced to life in prison. Karen had attempted to evade punishment for the brutal murders that shocked the community and left many unanswered questions. Her plan to cremate the victims' bodies was likely a last-ditch effort to avoid accountability. However, the court and jury remained resolute, ultimately rendering a fair and just verdict. Karen's decision to harm her loved ones remains a puzzle. Despite having everything for a happy life, her motivations may be rooted in emotions like jealousy. This tragic case reminds us that even close relationships can conceal dark secrets, and genuine love and loyalty should always be the top priority. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ekaterina Bauman. Ekaterina Bulgova was born on May 13, 1989, in Leningrad, a city that would later be renamed St. Petersburg. In 2009, Ekaterina, then 20 years old, traveled to Turkey with her family for a vacation. That's where she met Walter Bauman, a German citizen who was 13 years older than her. Walter had received his education in Germany and had a good income, but his personal life was lacking. He was searching for the perfect woman, but he didn't quite fit the criteria of a perfect man. He still lived with his parents, didn't take care of his appearance, and had a sloppy style. He often met women online, and many of them were Russian. Ekaterina and Walter got married in a luxurious ceremony. After the wedding, they moved into Walter's parents' home, which proved to be a challenging experience for Ekaterina. Living with Walter's parents was not easy, and this marked the beginning of problems for Ekaterina after her move to Germany. The fairy tale romance was starting to lose its magic. Walter's mother, Ludmila, was a strong-willed woman who had achieved great success as an immigrant in Germany. However, she struggled to accept that her son Walter was now a grown man in his 30s and no longer needed her guidance. Ekaterina, Walter's wife, tried her best to please Ludmila, but Ludmila continued to interfere in their marriage and criticize Ekaterina. In 2017, Ekaterina became pregnant, and Walter decided to use some of his savings to buy a house, hoping that this new chapter would bring positive change to their relationship. Unfortunately, the move did not have the desired effect, as Ludmila continued to visit frequently and insert herself into their lives. The birth of their daughter brought even more tension to the relationship between Walter and Ekaterina. Walter became increasingly strict and controlling, speaking down to Ekaterina and restricting her freedom. He prohibited her from learning to drive a car and did not allow her to speak with their daughter in German. Ekaterina was confused and unsure of what was causing these changes in Walter's behavior. Walter and Ekaterina's relationship had become strained, and he would physically harm her, including beating her. Authorities were alerted to the domestic violence issue in late 2019, but the case was dismissed when they claimed they had reconciled. Ekaterina expressed concerns about Walter's behavior, citing his lack of interest in her, excessive work habits, and resulting burnout. Feeling constantly stressed and fearful, Ekaterina turned to a support center for domestic violence victims for the first time in fall 2020. When Ekaterina and their daughter left, Walter made an effort to reconcile with them, promising to change and acknowledging his past wrongdoing. He also told Ekaterina that he couldn't live without her and their daughter. Although Ekaterina forgave him and returned home with their daughter, their arguments persisted. When Walter recognized he had wronged Ekaterina, he would try to make amends with gifts or family trips. While this may have indicated a change in attitude towards Ekaterina, Walter's behavior towards their daughter was marked by total control. Walter was a calculated individual who dramatized situations and manipulated others to get what he wanted. He was extremely frugal and prioritized accumulating wealth. Those who knew him well described him as anxious and impatient. After Ekaterina became a mother, she made several trips to Russia with her husband Walter, who was concerned that she would return to Russia and keep him from seeing their daughter. As Ekaterina experienced more and more abuse from Walter, she began to consider divorce. Ekaterina's reason for staying with Walter was to protect her daughter, but she couldn't take her daughter back to Russia because Walter had to give his consent, which he refused to do. In August 2021, Ekaterina took her daughter to a women's crisis center, telling the administration that Walter had threatened to take her life. Social services considered placing a 5-year-old girl in an orphanage, a situation the Youth Affairs Department psychologist deemed severe. Although Katerina initially agreed to let the child enter foster care, her husband Walter and his mother objected, forcing the parents to care for their daughter temporarily. The family reunited weeks later, but Walter and Katerina started divorce proceedings and began living separately. Katerina's desire to return to Russia intensified, but Walter consented only if their daughter remained with him in Germany. At the start of 2022, Katerina traveled to St. Petersburg alone, meeting a Russian pilot from Omsk she had met online while there. After returning to Germany in mid-January 2022, Katerina continued to communicate with the pilot daily. Katerina, a 32-year-old woman, stopped contacting her family and her new lover on February 4, 2022, after returning to Germany. This was a surprise to her family, as she had been exchanging love messages with her new lover just a few weeks earlier. According to her husband Walter, Katerina left behind most of her belongings, including her phone, keys, clothes, and her 5-year-old daughter. She took only an empty suitcase and 13,000 euros from her husband's stash. This is the information Walter shared with the police on February 6, 2022, after Katerina's parents reached out to them to request a check because they couldn't reach Katerina for 2 days. Katerina's mother, Svetlana, reported that she learned about her daughter's disappearance in a strange way. She couldn't reach Katerina on the phone for a few days, and when she spoke with Walter, he claimed that he hadn't seen her since February 5th and that she wasn't responding because she didn't have enough money on her phone balance. The police waited 4 days before searching the Walter family's house where Katerina was last seen. By then, Walter had completed his renovations, which included painting the guest room floor and replacing a couch. He had also purchased a large quantity of cleaning supplies from a local store. The police investigation at the Baumann house found that the surveillance footage had mysteriously disappeared. A detection dog was brought in to search the house and garage, but although it seemed agitated, it didn't indicate finding anything specific. Initial tests found no evidence in the house or garage, but a knife and electric shocker were seized from the car. What raised suspicions was Walter's unusual behavior. He showed no concern for his missing wife, but expressed interest in gaining sole guardianship of their 5-year-old daughter. On March 1, 2022, 25 days after her disappearance, the horrific discovery of a suitcase containing human remains that washed up along the River Weser. The person who discovered the suitcase was horrified to find that it contained the fragments of a woman's body, packed in garbage bags. Unfortunately, not all of her body parts were present in the suitcase, as some were still missing. To make matters worse, the fragments were identified as those of 32-year-old Katerina Baumann. Coincidentally, the suitcase was found near the lighthouse where Katerina had previously gotten married. During a thorough search of the Walter family home, investigators found a variety of suspicious items, including a bottle of sedatives that matched the substance found in Katerina's blood. Additional discoveries included disposable gloves, foil, adhesive tapes, garbage bags, and cleaning products, as well as canisters containing acetic acid, solvents, and bleach. Notably, the police found a pink scarf matching the one Katerina wore in her last selfie near her body. They also discovered a set of suitcase keys and other incriminating items in the garage and shed. Furthermore, the investigation revealed that most of Katerina's personal belongings were absent, with her clothes thrown away and her wedding photo hidden behind the piano. One key piece of evidence turned up at the workplace of Ludmila Baumann, Walter's mother. The white jacket Katerina wore in her last selfie was found in a trash container. Katerina's phone was last connected to the network at 7:41 p.m. Later that evening, she made a video call to her new lover from her computer at 8:25 p.m., saying she would call him again after putting her child to bed. However, she never made that call, and her phone remained silent for the rest of the evening. 2 hours after her video call, her lover sent her a goodnight message, which she never read. A forensic examination revealed that Katerina died 2 hours after dinner, based on the analysis of her stomach contents. The examination also found strong sedatives and alcohol in her blood, and her hyoid bone was broken, indicating that she was strangled. The examination further showed that her body was mutilated using very sharp tools. The next morning, Walter briefly opened his car door at 7:22 a.m., and the car was driven off at 10:20 a.m., returning at 4:49 p.m. 3 days later, Walter called Katerina's phone, likely to create the illusion that she had run away. He also sent her messages asking where she was in an attempt to maintain this illusion. Walter and his mother had a habit of chatting intensely through WhatsApp daily, but after February 4th, they suddenly stopped communicating, which was unusual for them. In the middle of February, Walter took his car to auto service and asked an employee to thoroughly clean the interior from top to bottom. This incident was later cited as evidence in a trial that began on August 26, 2022. The prosecutor argued that Walter had planned and executed the murder of his wife, Katerina, by slipping sedatives into her drink and then strangling her while she was asleep. Walter's motive was to avoid losing guardianship and potential financial losses in the event of a divorce. He had taken steps to prepare for Katerina's body disposal. Police found blood in the garage. Traces of her blood were also found on the carpet in the trunk of his car. Walter's phone and computer were seized by the police. He made several suspicious search queries, including how to avoid punishment for taking someone's life, dissolving human flesh with acid, and accessing other people's WhatsApp chats. He also searched for ways to die from sedatives and how to avoid conviction in Germany. Walter made around 500 search queries between December 2021 and February 2022, suggesting he planned the crime. On the day his wife disappeared, he searched for electric shocker twice. Forensic experts found evidence of electrocution on Katerina's body, suggesting Walter used a shocker to check if she was alive. In court, Walter wore his wedding ring and referred to himself as a widower. He remained silent, plugging his ears during testimonies, but showed emotion when his mother was called as a witness, crying and seeking her help with a prayer-like gesture. He had written to her asking for help, and she seemed willing to assist her son. Ludmila Baumann made a shocking statement, claiming she took Katerina's life, not her son. She visited her son's house at night to care for her granddaughter and found Katerina asleep on the couch. After a fight that started when Katerina hit her, Ludmila choked Katerina. She also admitted to performing certain actions with Katerina's body. It's possible Ludmila was motivated by her love for her son and took the blame for him. Despite her self-incrimination, Ludmila left the courtroom a free citizen as the jury and prosecutor's office didn't believe her statement, assuming she was trying to protect her son. Walter remained silent throughout the entire process, but during one of the final hearings, he read from his notes, which spanned 230 sheets of paper, covering his life, his experiences in Kazakhstan, and his love. His main message was that he loved Katerina and their daughter, but her emotional burnout and psychological problems led to frequent quarrels. Although his statement was extensive, he only briefly mentioned the night that changed everything. According to Walter, he was asleep when his mother took the life of his wife and dragged her into the garage. He blamed his mother for the crime, stating that she had betrayed him, used him, and sent him to prison. Addressing the judge, Walter said that his daughter had already lost her mother and should not lose her father as well. The most disturbing aspect of this story is not the gruesome details of the crime, but the fact that it all took place in front of the perpetrator's 5-year-old daughter. The Russian grandmother is currently barred from contacting her granddaughter, who has been placed with a German foster family. The daughter was present at home with her father when the crime occurred, and as a result, she has developed a psychotraumatic condition. She often mutters to herself, gesturing to her head and arms, indicating that she witnessed the traumatic event. According to her mother, Svetlana, the child is now living in a facility for traumatized children under a new name to protect her from the truth about her family. Svetlana is fighting to gain guardianship of her granddaughter, but German authorities are not allowing her to even have phone contact with the child. On May 23, 2023, the verdict was announced in the case of Walter Baumann. Walter received a life sentence, but under German law, he will be eligible for parole after serving 15 years. Ekaterina's ashes were buried in her hometown of St. Petersburg. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Vera Pekteleva. Vera Pekteleva was born on September 24, 1997, in Kelos, Kovo Oblast. She grew up to be a cheerful, creative, and talented individual who excelled in singing competitions during her school years. Despite her parents, Oksana and Yvonne, divorcing while she was still in school, Vera maintained a good relationship with both of them and their new partner. People who knew her described Vera as kind, positive, and avoiding conflict. After graduating from high school, Vera surprised her family by enrolling in the State Technical University in Kovo instead of pursuing a career in the arts. Her mother, Oksana, lived in Kisilov, about 110 miles from Kovo, and Vera would visit her during her free time. During one of these visits in 2016, Vera met Vladislav Kanyus, a young man her age. Vladislav was her opposite in many ways. He lacked direction, was introverted, and had a quick temper. He had dropped out of school after 9th grade and came from a troubled home. His mother had abandoned the family, leaving him to live with his father, who had legal problems and eventually took his own life in front of Vladislav. This traumatic experience had a lasting impact on Vladislav's life. Vera and Vladislav's relationship was unlikely, as they had little in common. Despite this, Vera fell in love with him. However, her parents were strongly opposed to the relationship due to Vladislav's troubled past. They wanted a better life for Vera and disapproved of her choice. Vera's mother, Oksana, stated that they waited for Vera to end the relationship, but instead, she stopped talking about Vladislav with them. Vladislav was never invited to family gatherings and did not appear in Vera's social media photos, making it seem like she was hiding him. In 2019, Vera and Vladislav moved in together in Kovo, with her parents helping to pay for the apartment. Although Vladislav was unemployed and had no intention of changing that, he enjoyed living with Vera, who was beautiful, smart, and financially stable. As a result, she supported him. The relationship was tense, and Vladislav's alcohol abuse was a major concern. Vera's parents suspected that Vladislav was physically abusing her as well. Vera ended her toxic relationship with Vladislav in November 2019 with the help of her parents, who assisted her in paying for a new apartment. Logically, Vladislav should have moved out, but he refused to do so, as he enjoyed living at someone else's expense. According to Vladislav's testimony, he and Vera had a fight on December 15, 2019, because he wanted to go to a nightclub, but she declined. Vladislav claimed that during their relationship, Vera began to distance herself from him, often traveling to Kelos, and eventually admitting to communicating with someone else. Keep in mind that this is Vladislav's testimony, and it's up to you to decide how credible his words are. According to Vladislav, a month before their breakup, Vera told him she was leaving him. Later, he found out from a mutual friend that she was already seeing someone else, a guy named Alexander from Selos. He didn't know Alexander personally. After learning this, he wanted to talk to Vera about it. They were still living together in the same apartment at the time. On December 15, 2019, they had a fight and she left, taking some of her things with her. Even though they weren't together anymore, they stayed in touch by phone. On January 12, 2020, he called Vera and offered to help her move her remaining belongings to a new place. She agreed, and they planned to meet up the next day to do the move. When January 13th came around, Vera showed up, and they packed up both her stuff and his, since he was planning to move out of the apartment too. He didn't want to stay there without her. On January 13th, 2020, Vladislav and Vera consumed beer, lure, and vodka while packing. They both became intoxicated. Despite their inebriated state, they did not argue during the drinking session, which continued until 5 a.m. on January 14th, 2020. However, a conflict emerged when Vladislav brought up their relationship and suggested they get back together. He also confronted her about seeing another guy, which Vera denied. This led to an altercation, during which Vera became aggressive, swearing, insulting, and physically attacking Vladislav. She kicked him in the groin area at least 5 times and slapped him in the face at least 8 times. Although he didn't feel pain from the slaps, the kicks caused him physical discomfort. Vladislav claimed that Vera's aggression was triggered by his discovery of her infidelity, which made him angry. Vera, on the other hand, accused him of prying into her personal life and continued to insult him. This is the version of events as told by Vladislav to the police. However, there are reasons to believe that Vladislav's testimony may not be entirely truthful. Vera was determined to move out of the apartment she shared with Vladislav and wanted no part in drinking with him. She asked her friend to assist her with the move and sent a voice message at 5:08 p.m., saying she was already packing her belongings and would be at her new apartment by 6 p.m. She requested her friend's help in transporting her belongings from the taxi to the new apartment. However, just 3 minutes later, Vera sent another voice message inviting her friend to come to her current apartment to help with the move. But before she could finish, Vladislav intervened, stating that no one was allowed in the apartment, effectively blocking her friend from coming. The situation was escalating, and at 5:15 p.m., Vera sent a quiet, low-voiced message to her friend, seemingly a distress call, as she attempted to keep it from Vladislav's ears. 10 minutes later, at 5:25 p.m., Vera sent another voice message, but this time Vladislav's voice could be heard, instructing Vera's friend not to bother them and to wait for Vera to text her. By 7:19 p.m., Vladislav had taken control, sending a voice message himself. From that point on, Vera was silenced, and her friend no longer heard from her. It seemed that Vera was trapped alone with Vladislav. The night took a dark turn when, at around 3 a.m., the neighbors on the same floor were awoken by blood-curdling screams coming from apartment 738. A bystander described the unfolding tragedy as a massacre. The screams from the apartment were so loud that 15 people, including Vladislav's brother, gathered in the hallway. Vladislav's brother recalled his brother's previous threats to harm Vera and realized they needed to intervene. Since the door was made of iron, the neighbors searched for tools to pry it open. Meanwhile, Vera's desperate cries for help continued to echo from the apartment. The bystanders called the emergency service multiple times, but their calls were ultimately part of a separate investigation. Despite the repeated calls, the police failed to arrive for 30 minutes until 6:30 a.m. During this agonizing period, the neighbors made 7 emergency calls, but no help came. The last words they heard from Vladislav were, "Vera, forgive me, I love you very much." Finally, the neighbors found a crowbar in a nearby parking lot and broke down the door. Tragically, they found Vera dead and Vladislav, who was heavily intoxicated, in the bathroom. Meanwhile, the 112 operators were indifferent to the emergency calls, chatting, laughing, and drinking tea, complaining about being disturbed as Vera lay dying at the hands of her former boyfriend. The police did not arrive at the scene until after Vera's death had been reported. They later justified their delayed response by claiming that one of their patrol cars had no gas and that all available officers were busy handling other emergency calls. As a result, the operators who handled the 112 emergency calls and the police officers on duty that night were also put on trial. A police station video was made public, showing officers displaying a shocking lack of urgency. Vladislav Konius initially claimed that he and Vera didn't have any conflicts until 5 a.m., but forensic evidence disputed this, showing that he had lied. In reality, Vera's first injury occurred around midnight, which meant that Vladislav had brutally beaten and injured her for 6 hours before she eventually died. The autopsy results were shocking, revealing a total of 100 injuries on Vera's body, including stab wounds, a broken nose and ribs, and evidence of strangulation around her neck. The community was outrageously upset, and more than 1,000 people attended her funeral, exceeding the church's capacity. Vera's mother, Oksana, was left devastated by the unrecognizable state of her daughter's body, which required an extensive 4-hour restoration process at the funeral home. At the same time, Vladislav was providing a false account to investigators, trying to downplay his role in the vicious crime. The indictment alleges that the police officers were negligent in their response to the situation. They had access to gasoline, but even if they didn't, they should have taken necessary steps to resolve the issue. However, they didn't treat the situation as urgent and failed to take prompt action. Furthermore, the 2 police officers refused to cooperate with the investigation and denied any wrongdoing. Their defense was that when witnesses reported the screams and cries for help, the investigation team was already occupied at a different location where a corpse had been discovered earlier. In 2022, Vladislav Konius was sentenced to 17 years in prison after admitting partial guilt. He was also ordered to pay $45,000 in compensation. Vera's parents were shocked by the leniency of the sentence and planned to appeal. However, Vladislav didn't serve his full sentence. In April 2023, it was discovered that he had received a presidential pardon after serving just 6 months in prison. Furthermore, photos of him in military uniform surfaced online in November 2023. Vladislav Konius, the person responsible for Vera's death, was not only pardoned, but also relieved of the obligation to pay compensation to her parents. The news sparked widespread outrage in Russia. The press secretary of the Russian president explained the pardoning procedure, stating that it involves a series of steps. First, the convict must confess to their crime. Then, the request for pardon is reviewed at multiple levels, including the Federal Bureau of Prisons, Regional, Federal District, and Central Commission, before reaching the president. Alternatively, convicts can also redeem themselves by fighting on the battlefield, where they risk their lives under fire. This alternative path to redemption is difficult to accept, especially for Vera's parents, who were devastated to learn that Konius was free to start anew, while their daughter would never have that chance. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Amanda Anderson. Amanda Anderson was born on October 10, 1990, in Fridley, Minnesota, to Mark and Stacy Kennedy Anderson. Amanda grew up to be an aspiring writer with a passion for words, music, and life. She graduated with honors from the Tyler Gospel Chapel School in 2009 and worked at Trinity Mother Frances while attending Tyler Junior College, where she majored in English literature. On September 15, 2010, 15-year-old Nate Anderson found his sister Amanda dead on the floor with multiple bullet holes in her head after returning from a jog. He had gone out to clear his head while doing homework, but became stressed and returned to find the door kicked open. Nate immediately called 911, describing the scene without touching anything. When investigators arrived, Nate recounted the events, still shaken. The investigation revealed that Amanda was shot while sitting on her bed, causing her to fall to the floor. The killer removed shell casings, suggesting a revolver was used. Amanda's death was devastating to her parents, who were deeply religious and couldn't comprehend who would commit such a heinous act. Their daughter had just graduated from high school and was trying to find her way in life. She had no enemies and wished no one harm. The investigators canvassed the neighborhood where the crime took place, speaking with residents to gather information about Amanda and her family. Uniformly, the people they interviewed described the Andersons as a tight-knit, religious family. One neighbor offered a possible theory about Amanda's fate. He pointed out that the area was previously crime-free, but 2 weeks before Amanda's death, a house in the neighborhood was robbed. It's possible that the same person was involved in Amanda's murder. The neighbor suggested that the perpetrator might have seen Amanda's brother, Nate, go for a run, then broken into their house. If Amanda witnessed the break-in, the robber might have shot her to silence her. To explore this theory, the investigators needed evidence to determine whether a botched robbery led to Amanda's death. Typically, burglars who are caught by homeowners will go to great lengths to prevent them from calling the police. However, in this case, nothing was taken from the Anderson home, and Amanda's room was left undisturbed. Amanda's home was burgled, but the thief didn't take anything valuable, including jewelry and a laptop. Amanda's father, Mark, checked the house and confirmed that nothing was missing. This led the investigators to question whether the break-in was actually a robbery gone wrong. The forensic team searched Amanda's room and the entire house for evidence, collecting fingerprints and hair samples that didn't belong to Amanda or her family. They also took the clothes Nate wore when he found Amanda's body, even though they didn't have any visible bloodstains. This was consistent with Nate's 911 call, in which he said he hadn't touched anything. The police still sent the clothes to the lab for further analysis, along with other evidence. To begin their investigation, the police first had to rule out Amanda's family members as potential suspects. They asked her father, Mark Anderson, to show them all the weapons in their house, which was a common practice in Texas. Although the Andersons weren't avid hunters, they did occasionally practice shooting. Following Mark's directions, the police found and seized over 10 different types of pistols, rifles, and revolvers from the house. With no clear motives or suspects, the police explored the possibility of criminal gang involvement, but they quickly dismissed it. Their informants also didn't provide any useful information. 2 days after her death, on September 17, 2010, the police received the autopsy report, which revealed that Amanda had been shot 4 times in the head. What was especially puzzling was that every shot would have been fatal. Yet, the perpetrator had continued to pull the trigger 3 more times. The unusual location and direction of the bullet wounds on Amanda's head raised suspicions. The attacker used a small caliber pistol, firing from a distance of at least a yard away, as there were no gunpowder marks around the wounds. 2 wounds were located on top of her head, one near the right temple and one on her forehead, with all shots entering from top to bottom, except for one shot to the right temple that entered at a right angle. This suggested a deliberate and controlled attack, more like an execution. Forensic analysis led investigators to believe that Amanda knew her killer. They based this conclusion on 2 key facts. Firstly, Amanda was sitting on her bed, occupied with her laptop, when she was shot, indicating that she felt comfortable and safe in the presence of the attacker. Secondly, the fact that the attacker was standing next to her suggests a level of familiarity and intimacy. If Amanda had not known the person, she would likely have reacted or taken action when they entered her room, but she did not, implying that she trusted the perpetrator and did not anticipate the attack. Detectives investigating Amanda's death questioned her college friends, learning she was cautious and avoided strangers, drugs, and criminals. Her best friend confirmed she had no enemies on campus. Despite this, they considered that someone might have secretly targeted her. Reviewing college security footage and reports from the past year, they searched for suspicious incidents but found nothing useful. The police revisited the Anderson family to inquire about Amanda's personal life, suspecting a personal motive behind the brutal crime due to the multiple wounds. Amanda's mother was baffled by the incident, describing her daughter as a kind and diligent student who regularly attended church. Although Amanda didn't have a boyfriend at the time of her death, her mother revealed that she had met someone about a year prior, but their relationship ended. The police sought out this individual to learn more about his connection with Amanda and the reasons behind their breakup. Upon questioning, the man revealed that he and Amanda shared some classes and occasionally went to the movies with friends, but they never developed a romantic relationship. They had gone out together a few times, but it didn't progress further. When asked about the last time he saw Amanda, he stated that it was the day before her murder. The police started their investigation again from the beginning, re-examining all the evidence. They focused on Nate's 911 call, which was the starting point of the case. During the call, Nate claimed he didn't enter his sister's room and that someone had shot Amanda. The investigators realized it was impossible for someone standing in the doorway to know Amanda was shot in the head or how many times without entering the room. The police revisited the Anderson house and inspected the door, which Nate said was opened when he got home. Although there were scratches on the door, the lock was intact, leading the police to believe someone was trying to make it look like the door was kicked in. The crime lab analyzed the weapons found in the Anderson house and concluded that one of the pistols was likely the weapon used to shoot Amanda. After a thorough investigation, detectives reached a conclusion. All evidence pointed to a family member as Amanda's killer. The murder weapon, a pistol, was hidden in a secure location, suggesting the killer knew exactly where to find it. Moreover, the killer returned the gun to its hiding place after the crime. On the night of the murder, Amanda's parents had solid alibis. Her father was dining with a friend, and her mother was at work. This left only Amanda and her 15-year-old brother Nate in the house. To find answers, investigators delved deeper into the events of that evening. It turned out that Amanda's father, Mark, had called her to remind her to pick up her mother from work. 12 minutes later, Mark received a call from Nate, who was crying and claimed someone had shot Amanda. However, this call raised a disturbing question. Why did Nate call his father before calling emergency services, unless he was trying to cover his tracks after murdering his own sister? The police required solid proof before making any accusations, as they didn't want to cause further distress to Amanda and Nate's parents. To gather more information, the investigators decided to question Mark Anderson, Nate's father, without directly accusing his son of involvement. During the conversation, Nate's parents became aware that the police suspected their son. When asked about Nate's recent use of the .22 caliber pistol, Mark revealed that he had given the gun to Nate a few days before Amanda's death, and that Nate had fired it in their backyard. The officers went back to the Anderson house and found .22 caliber casings in the backyard that matched the bullets found in Amanda's body. While this was suspicious, it wasn't conclusive evidence. However, 2 weeks later, a crucial clue was found. Nate's clothes, which he wore when he claimed to have found his sister dead, were tested with luminol, revealing traces of blood. Further analysis by a national blood spatter expert suggested that Nate was either in the room when the shooting occurred or was the one who fired the fatal shots. The tests confirmed that his clothes had Amanda's blood on them. Despite this, the Anderson siblings seemed to have a loving relationship. Photos showed them being affectionate, and their parents described them as best friends who often made videos together, including one just days before Amanda's death. The police were left wondering what could have driven Nate to commit such a heinous act. On November 10, 2010, police arrested Nate Anderson at a church, suspecting him of murdering his own sister. The accusation shocked everyone who knew him, as it seemed out of character. The trial began on October 24, 2011, and was an emotionally challenge for the Anderson family. Despite the evidence presented against Nate, his family remains supportive and refuses to believe he is capable of such a crime. According to his grandmother, Dolores Anderson, Nate is a kind and innocent boy who would never harm his sister. His parents, too, are adamant that he is not responsible for Amanda's death. For his mother, Stacy Anderson, the whole ordeal has been a nightmare. She is still adjusting to the loss of her daughter and now has to cope with her son's arrest. Mark expressed his outrage and disbelief at the accusation that his son killed his sister Amanda. The brutality of the crime, including the fact that Amanda was shot 4 times, has led Mark to conclude that Nate could not have committed the crime. Initially, Mark had some doubts about Nate's involvement, but once he learned about the 4 gunshots, he became convinced of his son's innocence. Mark is critical of the authorities, accusing them of ignoring evidence that exonerates Nate and instead focusing on evidence that supports their own case. He feels that they have already made up their minds about Nate's guilt, despite the fact that an expert had recommended that Nate be tried in juvenile court, not adult court. After Amanda's death, investigators found evidence in the Anderson home that shed light on the case. Prosecutors discovered that Nate's computer had a history of visits to adult websites and violent drawings. Furthermore, a text message on Amanda's phone mentioned someone should be shot, but the context indicated it was a joke about Nate not helping with chores and playfully shooting staples at Amanda. An expert testified that this evidence could be a motive for the crime. However, Nate's attorney argued that the evidence was not unusual or incriminating. Ultimately, Nate accepted a plea deal in February 2012 and pleaded guilty to a first-degree crime. He confessed to a psychologist and his parents that he had killed Amanda. In a statement, Nate and Amanda's parents shared Nate's confession. According to Mark Anderson, Nate told him that he shot Amanda with a pistol found in their home and asked for forgiveness, which he granted. Stacy, the mother, expressed the immense difficulty she experienced as a mother who loves both her children. Nate Anderson has been sentenced to 20 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years. His attorney believes that agreeing to the plea deal was in Nate's best interest, as neither Nate nor his family wanted the case to go to trial. Regarding the motive behind the crime, Nate's attorneys declined to provide details, saying only that they know what happened and are choosing not to discuss it further. However, they did reveal that Nate has shown remorse for his actions, has asked for forgiveness, and has received it. The attorneys described the process of coming to terms with what happened as difficult and emotional. The authorities have determined that the incident was a hate crime, as there was no evidence of any other trauma. According to the Smith County Sheriff's Office, Nate will be eligible to apply for parole in 2 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Cassie Farrington. Born on December 22, 1990 in Virginia, Cassie Marie Brooks was the second oldest of 4 children to Chuck and Darlene Brooks. She excelled in school, became a member of the National Honor Society, participated in sports, and aspired to become a doctor. However, everything changed when she got pregnant at 16. She had to adjust her plans, and in 1 month, she graduated from high school, gave birth, married Bradley Farrington, and moved out of her parents' house. Years later, Cassie had a second child, but her marriage began to deteriorate. At 22, she got divorced. With her 2 children, she lived in Silver City, a town where she worked as a nurse at a local hospital and rented a place from a coworker. By the time Cassie turned 23, she had entered a new romantic relationship with a man named David Barry. He quickly formed a strong bond with her 2 children, which brought her great joy. Cassie and David took their time building a life together, and she was thrilled to report to her family and colleagues that he brought happiness and stability to both her and the kids. On March 24, 2014, Cassie phoned her parents after finishing her night shift at Silver City Hospital. During their conversation, she outlined her plan for the morning, driving home, picking up the kids, taking them to school, and then returning home to rest for a few hours before picking them up again later that day. Cassie was supposed to pick up her kids from school, but she didn't show up even after their classes had finished. School staff tried to reach her, but couldn't, so they called her parents. Her mother, Darlene, tried to call her too, but there was no answer. Darlene thought maybe Cassie had just overslept after working a night shift, so she asked Sherelle, Cassie's landlord, to check on her. Sherelle went to the house, knocked on the door, and called out Cassie's name, but got no response. She then went around to the back door, looked through the window, and saw water pouring out of the bathroom into the kitchen. Sherelle knocked on the door again, louder this time, and shouted Cassie's name, still with no response. She used her own key to unlock the door and entered the house, where she heard the sound of running water getting louder. As she walked through the wet kitchen towards the bathroom, she continued to call out Cassie's name, her voice starting to shake. When she finally saw Cassie, her worst fears were confirmed. Cassie's body lay face down in the overflowing bathtub, water still pouring out. Sherelle found her and pulled her out of the water, placing her on the floor. Unfortunately, it was too late to try CPR, her body indicating Cassie had been dead for several hours. Sherelle quickly called 911 to report the situation, and paramedics and police were dispatched to the house. She also had the difficult task of informing Cassie's parents of their daughter's passing. While waiting for help to arrive, Sherelle searched the house and discovered another bathtub, also overflowing with running water, suggesting a possible accident or intentional act. The tub had a feature to prevent overflow, so the extra water flowed into the drain instead of spilling onto the floor. Sherelle noticed that the towel rack, which was previously mounted on the wall, was now lying on the floor, having been torn off. Meanwhile, Chuck and Darlene, who lived in Arizona, immediately dropped everything and traveled to Silver City after receiving the news. A couple of hours after receiving the devastating news, Cassie's parents arrived at the house where her body had been found. The police were already on the scene, and they noticed that there was no evidence of break-in. The doors and windows were locked, and the glass was intact. Additionally, valuable items that might have attracted a thief were left untouched. The police chief's first question to Cassie's parents was whether their daughter had been suicidal or had any reason to take her own life. Cassie's parents, Chuck and Darlene, were adamant that their daughter would never do such a thing, especially not with young children depending on her. Despite their protestations, the police chief repeated his suggestion that Cassie's death was likely a deliberate act. The police investigation was remarkably brief, lasting only a few hours, which struck Cassie's parents as unusual. Typically, the police take days to thoroughly examine the scene of a tragedy. In this case, they seemed eager to wrap things up quickly, even telling Sherelle that she could reuse the house soon. This hasty approach only added to Cassie's parents' growing unease, prompting them to decide to investigate the house themselves. When Cassie's parents drained the bathtub, they were surprised to find water still in it. They also discovered a series of black streaks on the tub's sides, similar to the marks left by rubber-soled shoes on the floor in various areas. Additionally, they found Cassie's glasses, hairband, and a coat hanger. Given these discoveries and the lack of fingerprint evidence collected by the police, Chuck and Darlene suspected that the authorities might be trying to quickly close Cassie's case as non-criminal. However, a call to the district attorney's office prompted the police to appear more diligent in their investigation. The medical examiner's report ultimately prevented the case from being closed. It revealed that Cassie's body had multiple bruises, including those on her neck. The forensic medical examiner concluded that her death was a homicide caused by an unspecified mechanism of injury. Unfortunately, the crime scene was no longer of significant use due to the property owner's subsequent cleanup and renovations. As a result, the police were unable to uncover new leads, leaving Cassie's parents with no updates on the case for months. David Barry, who had been in contact with Cassie before her death, was quickly cleared as a suspect due to his solid alibi. As time went on, Cassie's parents, Chuck and Darlene, grew increasingly frustrated with the local police, feeling they were not doing enough to investigate their daughter's death. After meeting with the chief district attorney, Chuck and Darlene requested that action be taken against Detective Jose Sanchez, who was handling the case. The district attorney reviewed the case file and agreed that Sanchez had made several mistakes. As a result, Sanchez was removed from the case and a more experienced detective was assigned. The new detective focused on the person Cassie's family and close friends had suspected from the start, her ex-husband, Bradley Farrington. Cassie and Bradley were in a bitter dispute over their children's custody at the time of her death. Given the court's likely ruling, it's probable that the children would have remained with their mother. Bradley stood to gain the most from Cassie's death, as it would grant him custody of the children and release him from his child support obligations. Bradley Farrington became a suspect in Cassie's death investigation. Having quit the force just months prior, Bradley had a motive for the crime. Moreover, his law enforcement background gave him the necessary expertise to manipulate the investigation and conceal evidence. Unfortunately, the bathwater had erased any potential DNA evidence and destroyed the shoe prints on the floor. Any incriminating evidence that may have linked Bradley Farrington to the crime scene was irreparably lost due to the incompetence of the local police. The only remaining option to hold Bradley accountable was through eyewitness accounts. Cassie told her parents that Bradley had often been abusive to her and the children, and that he had even mocked her, suggesting she try to report him to the police. As a Silver City police officer at the time, he felt invincible and above the law. It's heartbreaking to imagine Cassie's desperation, knowing she couldn't seek help from the police because her abusive husband's friends were part of the force. At her workplace, she confided in coworkers about Bradley's threats, including his chilling warning that he would make her disappear and no one would ever know. But in the end, 19 months later, on October 23, 2015, Bradley Farrington was arrested and charged in connection with her death. Bradley stood trial for Cassie's murder. At the trial, the prosecution presented multiple witnesses, including Cassie's parents, friends, and coworkers, who all testified about the abuse Cassie had suffered at the hands of her police officer husband. Additionally, Dr. Michael Hunter, a leading forensic expert from San Francisco, testified, assessing the conclusions drawn by local experts. Hunter, an experienced professional with over 20 years in his field, presented autopsy photographs to the jury and concluded that Cassie's neck injuries suggested she was likely strangled to death. Former Detective Sanchez, who initially handled the case before retiring, was subpoenaed to testify in court. He stated that he never considered Bradley Farrington a suspect during the initial investigation, as there was no evidence to warrant it. Sanchez also revealed that no fingerprints were collected from the crime scene. Sanchez expressed his suspicion that the crime scene had been intentionally cleaned up after the fact, which would explain why no fingerprints were found. After deliberating for 4.5 hours, the jury found Bradley Farrington guilty on September 7, 2018, and sentenced him to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 30 years. In 2020, Farrington appealed his conviction to the New Mexico Supreme Court. He argued that the trial court had improperly allowed friends, family members, and co-workers of the victim to testify about statements Cassie made regarding his threats and acts of domestic violence. The state's highest court has upheld Bradley's conviction, ruling that there was sufficient evidence to support it. The court also rejected Bradley's appeal against the hearsay testimony that was allowed during his trial. Bradley is currently serving his sentence in prison. His children are now in the care of his parents, who are restricting their contact with the family of the victim. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Katie Sepich. Katie Sepich's mom described her as an outgoing, vibrant, and intelligent 22-year-old. Born and raised in Carlsbad, New Mexico, Katie was the eldest of 3 siblings. She earned a business degree from New Mexico State University and was planning to pursue her MBA in the fall. In addition to her studies, Katie worked as a waitress at a local Mexican restaurant. During her time at the university, she met Joe Bischoff, and their initial friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship. Katie confided in her mom, Diane, about her happiness with Joe and her desire to build a future together. Months later, Joe proposed to Katie with a diamond ring, making her dreams seem within reach. However, after they graduated in the summer of 2003, their relationship began to struggle. They faced challenges when Katie decided to continue her studies, while Joe returned to his parents' home in Gallup, New Mexico, a small city 350 miles from Las Cruces. Katie was devastated when Joe had to leave, making their long-distance relationship extremely difficult. Despite the challenges, they found ways to reunite occasionally. One such opportunity arose on Labor Day weekend in 2003, when Joe visited Katie and Katie was ecstatic. However, their reunion took a devastating turn. On Saturday, August 30th, 2003, Katie enjoyed a fun night out with Joe and their friends, visiting several bars before ending up at a local house party. But after that, Katie vanished. The next day, Katie's mother, Diane, received a life-changing phone call. Diane recalled the moment she discovered her daughter was missing. She described how, on August 31st, 2003, her family had woken up to a beautiful day filled with friends and family as they prepared to celebrate Labor Day weekend with a cookout. Then, at 2:15 that afternoon, the phone had rung, Veronica asking if they had talked to Katie that day. Veronica, Katie's roommate, was frantically calling everyone who knew Katie, trying to find out if they had seen her. She had already contacted all of Katie's friends and even checked with local hospitals, but no one had any information about her whereabouts. According to Veronica, Katie had left a party alone the previous night. Veronica and her boyfriend Joe had stayed behind and fallen asleep at the party house. They assumed Katie had gone home, but when they woke up the next morning, Katie was nowhere to be found. Katie's family immediately notified the police and filed a missing persons report. Shortly after, a disturbing discovery was made near a desert landfill, a deceased female body, partially undressed and exhibiting clear signs of a recent and intentional murder. The police were called to the scene and found no identification near the body. However, they could tell that the body had been there for no more than a day. The victim appeared to be between 20 and 25 years old, and the fact that she was naked from the waist down suggested that the motive behind the crime was likely sexual. The victim's body showed signs of strangulation, leading investigators to initially suspect it as the cause of death. Upon closer inspection, they noticed no signs of struggle near the body, indicating that she likely died elsewhere and was moved to the desert landfill to delay discovery. Further examination revealed burn marks on her arms and back, suggesting the perpetrator attempted to dispose of the body or destroy evidence by setting her on fire. The police soon connected the dots between Katie's disappearance and the unidentified body. Katie's father was tasked with identifying the body at the morgue, an experience that left him and his wife, Gianna, shattered. The body was their daughter, Katie. The police's first step was to interview Katie's roommate, Veronica, and her boyfriend, Joe. It was unusual that they stayed at the party while Katie left alone in the middle of the night. However, Joe was uncooperative, claiming that Katie had left her belongings behind. The detective retraced Katie's likely route, knocking on doors and speaking with residents, hoping to gather information. Unfortunately, no one reported seeing or hearing anything unusual. However, one discovery suggested that Katie may have reached her house but never entered it. Katie left her house without her keys. The investigator found her shoes outside her bedroom window, suggesting she tried to sneak back in. It looks like someone attacked her at that moment, as evidenced by footprints in the gravel. Katie put up a fight, but sadly, her attacker was too strong. The police think the killer then took her body to a desert landfill and tried to burn. The investigation focused on the party Katie attended earlier that night, which about 40 people went to. It's possible someone followed her home and attacked her. Could it have been her boyfriend, Joe? The police interviewed everyone at the party and discovered something important that Joe hadn't mentioned. Katie saw him kissing another girl, which led to a fight and her decision to leave alone, forgetting her purse. Katie was furious and wanted to escape the party as quickly as possible. However, when the police first questioned Joe, he didn't mention the argument they had. He also didn't tell Katie's parents, who were wondering why she left the party alone, about the fight. Later, the investigators questioned Joe again, telling him they knew about the argument because Katie saw him kissing another girl. Joe admitted it was true. He claimed that after Katie left, he followed her in his car, but only drove up to her house and didn't go inside. He thought she was asleep because her bedroom light was off, so he returned to the party. It turned out Joe wasn't at the party when Katie was attacked. None of the partygoers could confirm exactly when Joe got back. He might have had time to commit the crime, take Katie's body to the desert, and return to the party. When the investigators questioned the party attendees, they found another suspicious detail. After returning to the party, Joe started calling Katie's cell phone, which was in her purse. He found the phone when it started ringing and knew it belonged to Katie. Despite this, Joe continued calling her phone until morning. The investigators were puzzled by Joe's behavior and wondered if he was trying to create an alibi or feign concern for his girlfriend Katie. They wanted to question him further, but Joe refused to cooperate with the police. His absence from Katie's funeral only fueled their suspicion. The investigators needed to obtain his DNA sample and compare it to the DNA evidence found on Katie's body. The evidence included human skin cells discovered under her fingernails, which were identical in all 3 locations. However, getting Joe's DNA sample proved to be a challenge. He was out of town, and his parents had hired a lawyer who informed the police that Joe was refusing to provide a DNA sample. Looking at Joe's suspicious behavior, everyone was convinced he was hiding something and possibly involved in Katie's death. The police needed a legitimate way to obtain his DNA to confirm their suspicions, but it took time. While they worked on that, they also explored other leads, investigating similar cases to see if Katie was the only victim. The DNA samples found on Katie's body didn't match anyone in the national database. So, the investigators went back to the party where it all started. They asked all the male attendees to provide a DNA sample, and everyone agreed since they had nothing to hide. However, none of their DNA samples matched the one found on Katie's body, which led the investigators back to Joe. He was the only one who refused to provide his DNA, but the police found another way to get it. They discovered that Joe and Katie had been intimate in her bedroom before the party. The police took the bedsheet from Katie's room, hoping to find Joe's DNA, and they were successful. However, the male DNA found on the bedsheet didn't match the one found on Katie's body, clearing Joe of any involvement in her death. This raised another question. Why had Joe refused to cooperate with the police if he wasn't involved in Katie's death? After receiving the test results from the police, Joe's lawyer informed him that he was no longer a suspect. With this new information, Joe decided to cooperate with the police and provide a DNA sample. The subsequent test confirmed the initial finding: Joe was not involved in Katie's murder. When questioned about his initial reluctance to cooperate, Joe explained that he and Katie had been intimate before the party, and he worried that his DNA would be found on her body. Despite being cleared, the circumstances surrounding Joe's behavior on the night of Katie's death remained unclear to both the police and Katie's family. With Joe no longer a suspect, the investigation turned its focus to other leads. Several partygoers reported that Katie wore rings, including one given to her by Joe, but none were found on her body when it was discovered. The police believed the killer must have removed them. Although they searched local pawn shops, Katie's jewelry was never found. Another potential clue was a set of tire tracks near where Katie's body was discovered. Forensic experts were able to identify the brand and model of the tires. The manufacturer informed the police that these tires were commonly used on pickup trucks. The case of Katie's murder reached a dead end until a similar crime occurred in Green Bay, Wisconsin, about a year later. A girl was attacked and set on fire, but miraculously, she survived by pretending to be dead until her attackers left. She sought help at a nearby house and described her assailants to the police as two Hispanic males. The police published sketches of the suspects, which led a farmer to identify them as his workers, Gregorio Morales and Juan. One of them had relatives in Las Cruces, where Katie was killed, and often visited them. They were arrested, and the police believed they had finally caught Katie's killer. However, DNA analysis proved otherwise. The DNA samples from the Wisconsin suspects did not match the DNA evidence found on Katie's body, leaving the case still unsolved. Two men, Neo and Morales, were later found guilty of assaulting a girl in Green Bay, but they were not involved in Katie's case. Neo received a 70-year prison sentence, while Morales got 50 years. This led to another dead end in the investigation. The police were left with only two pieces of evidence: tire tracks from the crime scene and DNA samples from the perpetrator. On December 18, 2006, a significant breakthrough occurred in the investigation when a lab discovered a DNA sample matching the one found on Katie's body. The DNA belonged to 26-year-old Gabriel Avila, a married father with a lengthy criminal record. Notably, Avila had been released from prison shortly before Katie's murder, and he had no prior connection to her. Just 3 months after Katie's brutal murder, Avila was arrested on November 13, 2003, for breaking into the apartment of two young women while wielding a knife. They managed to protect themselves by locking themselves in the bathroom and calling 911. Avila was subsequently convicted of aggravated burglary with intent to commit aggravated assault in March 2004. However, Avila was released on bond and promptly became a fugitive. Unfortunately, the system's flaws delayed his connection to Katie's death by 3.5 years. Avila evaded authorities for nearly a year before being apprehended in November 2004, thanks to a tip. He could have been arrested as early as 3 months after Katie's attack, but the imperfections in the system allowed him to remain at large. Avila was sentenced to 9 years in prison, but it wasn't until 2 years into his sentence that a DNA sample was finally tested. The results showed a partial match with DNA evidence found at Katie's crime scene, prompting investigators to take swift action. They quickly located the truck Avila had used to dump Katie's body and found a ring belonging to Katie in the center console. The detectives investigating Katie's case visited Avila in prison after discovering Katie's ring in his truck. Avila confessed to the crime, explaining that he had been in the area that night to buy illegal substances while his wife was away. He claimed to have seen Katie and offered her a ride, which she declined. Later, Avila encountered Katie again in front of her house. He claimed to have stopped and offered to help her, saying she was unable to get into her house because she didn't have her purse. Katie had planned to enter her bedroom through the window, but Avila attacked her, undressed her, and committed the crime. Avila removed Katie's clothes and then, fearing she would identify him, decided to strangle her. During the struggle, he grabbed her throat and found himself unable to let go. After killing her, Avila placed her body in his pickup truck and drove to a desert landfill where he dumped her body. Avila attempted to destroy evidence by setting Katie's body on fire, but this failed. A DNA sample was later taken from Avila and matched with evidence found on Katie's body in 2003. At the time, however, it was illegal in most states, including New Mexico, to take DNA samples from those arrested. DNA was only entered into the system after a conviction and subsequent imprisonment. This led Katie's parents to campaign for a law that would require those arrested for violent crimes to submit a DNA sample, which would then be added to the national database. They fought to have this law, named after their daughter, passed in all 50 states. Katie's Law, which was passed in New Mexico in 2006 with near-unanimous support, allows for the collection of DNA samples from individuals arrested for certain crimes. Thanks to the persistent efforts of Katie's parents, the law was made federal in 2010 and has since been adopted by over 31 states. The trial of Gabriel Avila started in 2017. During the trial, Avila apologized to Katie's family and expressed remorse. However, his lawyer asked the judge to be lenient, stating that Avila had shown remorse. On the other hand, District Attorney Susana Martinez argued that Avila only confessed after being confronted with DNA evidence more than 3 years after the crime. At the sentencing, Katie's father, David, begged the judge not to show leniency. He passionately argued that since they would never get to see their daughter again, Avila shouldn't be allowed to experience freedom again. In May 2007, Gabriel Avila was found guilty and sentenced to 69 years in prison. He will be eligible for parole in 2043 after serving 30 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Autumn Taggart. Autumn Taggart was a single mother living in Windsor, a city on the border between Michigan, USA, and Ontario, Canada. In 2018, Autumn and her 9-year-old son Gavin spent a Saturday with Gavin's father, Chris, from whom Autumn had amicably separated. They all went grocery shopping together, and later Chris dropped them off at their third-floor apartment. That evening, Chris left for his own home, and Gavin spent quality time with his mother, playing video games before bed. As he drifted off to sleep, he was awoken by a strange noise. Opening his eyes, he was startled to see an unknown man standing in his room. The man instructed Gavin to close his eyes and go back to sleep before disappearing into the hallway. Gavin's room was adjacent to his mother's, which was on the right-hand side of his room. Approximately a minute after the stranger left his room, Gavin heard his mother's scream. Overcome with fear, Gavin had never felt such terror before. The screaming eventually stopped, and an eerie silence fell over the apartment. Exhausted and shaken, Gavin eventually fell back asleep. The next morning, Gavin woke up and immediately went to his mother's room. Everything in the apartment was smashed and destroyed. Gavin found his mother lying on the bed. At first, he thought she was asleep, but when he saw the blood on her nose, he realized she was dead. This discovery shocked him. Gavin couldn't contain his emotions. He broke down in tears and decided to seek help. He entered his mother's room, took her phone, and messaged his father, Chris, via the Messenger app. Gavin sent a message saying that Autumn wouldn't wake up. Chris and his girlfriend immediately drove to Autumn and Gavin's home. Upon arrival, Chris got out of the car and saw his son standing behind a glass door on the third floor. Since Chris didn't have an electronic key to enter the building, Gavin went downstairs to let him in. Chris asked Gavin to stay with his girlfriend while he checked on Autumn. When Chris entered the apartment and then the bedroom, he was met with a devastating sight. Autumn was lying pale and still. Autumn's body showed signs of severe trauma, with bruises on her face and body and a bloody nose. He immediately called 911 and police and paramedics arrived at the scene. Unfortunately, the paramedics were unable to save her and she was pronounced dead. The police investigation began, and experts searched the apartment for evidence. A child specialist interviewed Gavin, who reported that a man had told him to go to sleep the night before. Gavin said he heard his mother screaming, but the screams stopped after a while. He described the man he saw in his room as a white male of average height with messy hair, who appeared disheveled, as if he had just gotten out of bed. Gavin estimated the man was slender, but not extremely thin. The autopsy revealed that Autumn's death was caused by strangulation, and forensic experts found evidence that she had been physically assaulted before her death. Additionally, the examination showed injuries in her genital area and the presence of male DNA on her body. Initially, the police considered the possibility that the killer was one of the building's tenants. However, Gavin reported that the man he saw on the night of the crime was not a familiar face. Furthermore, the investigation showed that the perpetrator not only needed an electronic key to enter the building, but also to enter Autumn's apartment. Yet, There were no signs of forced entry on the door to her apartment. The police initially considered two possibilities: that Autumn had let the perpetrator in herself, or that she had left the door unlocked. However, they soon discovered evidence that suggested the perpetrator had actually climbed to the third floor. The perpetrator first accessed the second-floor balcony and then climbed up to the third floor, where the door was open, allowing them to enter the apartment without difficulty. On the night of the crime, a witness reported seeing a new black SUV, possibly a Honda Pilot, in the parking lot next to the building. The SUV was there until around 6 a.m. Detectives suspected that the owner of the SUV might be connected to the victim's death. They believed that the perpetrator may have used the SUV as a stepping stone to climb into the building, and then used the decorative protrusions on the building's corners as a makeshift ladder to climb from the second floor to the third floor. The crime occurred at night, which made it easier for investigators to analyze mobile phone activity in the area where Autumn lived. One of the active phone numbers belonged to Autumn's neighbor, Michelle, who lived in the same building. During the initial police interview, Michelle claimed she didn't know anything about the crime. However, phone records showed that she had been on the move around the city, making calls from different locations, and had turned off her phone around the time of the murder. Although the exact location of Michelle's phone couldn't be pinpointed due to some margin of error, it was clear that she was either in or near her apartment at the time of the crime. The detectives suspected that Michelle was hiding something and decided to question her again. During the second interview, Michelle continued to deny any knowledge of the crime. However, the police warned her that withholding information could make her an accomplice to the crime. Faced with this possibility, Michelle began to open up. She revealed that a man named Jay had contacted her boyfriend and her around 2 a.m. on the night of the crime. Jay wanted to purchase an illicit substance and also hire an escort. To begin, Jay, Michelle, and her boyfriend went to an ATM where Jay withdrew cash. Michelle and her boyfriend then provided Jay with a portion of the substance, which Michelle admitted they were selling themselves. Later, Jay asked to buy more of the substance. Michelle instructed Jay to drive to the parking lot near her building, where she and her boyfriend planned to rob him. Upon arrival, the three of them used the substance together. Afterwards, Michelle and her boyfriend decided to flee. Before escaping, Michelle hid a bag of the banned substance in her genital area. This detail will become important later. Michelle reported that she and her boyfriend fled the scene, taking both the banned substance and a portion of Jay's money with them. They ran to the building's entrance and then proceeded to her apartment, where they locked themselves in, remained quiet, and kept the lights off. Jay was unable to enter the building because he didn't have an electronic key. From Michelle's apartment window, they observed shoe marks on the roof of Jay's car. The man left the scene around 6 a.m. Investigators believe that Jay attempted to enter the building to find the individuals who had stolen from him. However, since Jay didn't know Michelle's address, it's likely that he mistakenly entered Autumn's apartment instead. The police now had the suspect's phone number and photo, which were obtained from security cameras at the bank where he withdrew cash to purchase the banned substance, as well as from an ATM camera. After investigating the phone number, authorities discovered that the individual's name was not Jay, but rather Jitesh Bhogal, a 27-year-old Canadian citizen who worked as a car development engineer in Warren, Michigan. He owned a black Honda Pilot SUV and frequently visited Canada, crossing the border via bridge or tunnel to get to Windsor. Authorities tracked his movements and found that he had left Canada on the morning of June 10th, the day Autumn died, and had not returned to the country since. When the police released information about the black SUV seen at the victim's house, Jitesh sold his car, which raised suspicions. The Canadian police contacted their American counterparts and learned that Jitesh was planning to move from Michigan to Washington State, where his parents lived in Kent. This decision to give up his job and move back to his parents' house, get rid of his car, and stop visiting Canada was highly suspicious. However, the police needed concrete evidence to arrest and extradite him to Canada. The Windsor police requested assistance from the U.S. National Security Agency to aid in the investigation and track the suspect's movements. To confirm that the male DNA found on Autumn's body belonged to Jitesh, they needed to obtain a sample of his DNA for comparison. U.S. agents monitored Jitesh's activities, aware that he was planning to move to Washington state and potentially flee to a third country. Jitesh attempted to alter his appearance by shaving off his beard and wearing blue contact lenses. But Jitesh was not cautious enough. During a visit to a bar in Warren, he left behind a glass after finishing his drink. Agents seized the glass, which provided them with a DNA sample. Although the comparison process took time, the result was not unexpected. The DNA sample from the glass matched the male DNA found on Autumn's body, confirming that it belonged to Jitesh Bogle. On August 17, 2018, more than 2 months after Autumn's death, Jitesh was arrested at his parents' home in Kent, Washington. The Canadian police charged him with the murder of Autumn Taggart. Due to restrictions in the country, the trial was postponed for a significant period of time and eventually began in November 2021. To maintain social distancing, the trial was held in 3 separate courtrooms. The main courtroom contained the judge, prosecutor, jury, and the defendant, along with his defense team. The 3 other courtrooms had large screens broadcasting the trial so that Autumn's relatives and others could watch. Jitesh Bogle entered a not guilty plea for the crime of taking Autumn's life, saying it was an accident. He explained that some dealers had stolen money and an illegal substance from him, running out of his car after committing the crime. This upset him, so he got out of the vehicle to try to find them. Due to the large amount of alcohol and substances he had consumed, he did not remember much of what happened that night. Jitesh said he remembered climbing onto the balcony before entering the apartment where Autumn lived. When he entered her apartment, he saw her asleep in her bed, but he mistakenly thought she was Michelle, the person who had robbed him. When Autumn woke up and started screaming, Jitesh told her to be quiet, but she didn't stop. In an attempt to quiet her, Jitesh covered her mouth, which ultimately caused her to suffocate. Jitesh said that when the screaming stopped, he realized what had happened and tried to revive Autumn by performing CPR. But unfortunately, it didn't work. Jitesh did not recall how Autumn's genital injuries occurred or how he left her apartment. His lawyers asked the prosecution to drop the first-degree murder charges, arguing that the crime was not premeditated. They believed that Jitesh was not in control of his actions due to the large amount of substances he had consumed. The fact that he placed his hand over her mouth was more consistent with an attempt to silence her than with an intent to kill. Bogle's defense team argued that he was not responsible for the death of Autumn Taggart because he was intoxicated and did not have the capacity to form intent or understand the consequences of his actions. They stated that his behavior was the result of intoxication and that he did not intentionally cause the death. The defense team questioned the reliability of the DNA evidence, suggesting that it could have been contaminated by John Lorda, a forensic expert who worked on the case. They argued that Lorda's actions, including rotating the body on the bed sheet, could have transferred DNA or fluids from the body to the sheet or vice versa, resulting in cross-contamination. Lort testified during cross-examination that he followed proper procedures to prevent cross-contamination of evidence. He changed gloves between handling each piece of evidence and taking photographs. Lort's examination of evidence in Taggart's room included a search for fluids such as urine, saliva, and semen, as these are common indicators of sexual assault in cases involving a deceased female victim. The prosecutor disagreed with the defendant's version of events. The prosecutor pointed out that the defendant had previously searched for substances in the same area of Autumn's body where Michelle had hidden them, which suggested that the defendant was aware of the substances and had intentionally committed sexual assault. The prosecutor stated that the defendant's actions were disgusting and constituted sexual assault. Jitesh Bogle disagreed with the prosecutor's assessment. When asked why he didn't call for emergency services when Autumn stopped breathing, Bogle explained that he was afraid of being arrested because he didn't think anyone would believe him. Bogle admitted that he didn't remember much of what happened in Autumn's room, but he did recall performing CPR on her after she stopped screaming. Gavin, Autumn's 13-year-old son, also took the stand during the trial. To make the experience less intimidating, he testified from a separate room in the courthouse, accompanied by a support worker. From this room, he shared his account of the events that occurred that night. On December 1, 2021, a 12-person jury delivered a guilty verdict to Jitesh Bogle for first-degree murder. The jury did not find sufficient evidence to prove that Bogle had intercourse with the victim, Autumn. Autumn's father, John Tager, expressed relief and satisfaction with the verdict, stating that it was the right outcome for Autumn and her son, and that the family had finally received justice. On January 5, 2022, the court sentenced Jitesh Bogle to life imprisonment with a minimum of 25 years to be served before he can apply for parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Danielle Jennings. Danielle Jennings was born on September 16, 1978, in Columbia, South Carolina, USA. She spent her childhood in Stockton, Georgia, with her mother and stepfather. Despite her cheerful and outgoing personality, Danielle faced a challenging situation when she became pregnant at the age of 16. However, she was determined to be a good mother and had no doubts about having her child. After the breakup with Carl, the father of her child, Danielle gave birth to her son, Tristan, in 1996. At just 17 years old, she became a single mother. Despite the challenges, Danielle was determined to provide the best life for herself and her son. She eventually met Luis, a man who would become a father figure to Tristan. Danielle and Luis had known each other since they were teenagers and had been friends in the past. When they started dating, Danielle was happy to have found someone who could support her and her son. Luis took care of Danielle and Tristan, and she felt like her life was finally falling into place. They moved in together, and Danielle found a job at a landscaping company. She was proud of herself for taking this step and was glad to have found a sense of stability and security. In December 1998, Luis proposed to Danielle, and she happily accepted. At the time, Danielle's life was on the upswing. She had a wonderful son, was engaged to the man she loved, and had promising career prospects. However, her life was about to take a devastating turn. On March 15, 1999, Luis came home from work to find Danielle lifeless on their bed. Their son, Tristan, was at daycare that day. Luis immediately knew something was wrong based on the color of Danielle's skin. He called 911, and police arrived at their apartment in Norcross, Georgia. The initial information was that a woman had died and her fiancé had made the 911 call. This raised suspicions among investigators, as it is not uncommon for the partner to be involved in the death of their loved one. Luis reported the crime to the police at the apartment entrance, stating that the victim was 20-year-old Danielle Jennings. According to Luis, he found Danielle's body when he returned from work. She was lying face down on the bed, and when he turned her over, he discovered that she was dead. Luis immediately called 911. The police took Luis to the station for questioning, and investigators examined the crime scene. Danielle was lying on her back on the bed, fully dressed, with a ligature around her neck. The ligature was a stocking tied very tightly, indicating that the perpetrator left her no chance of survival. The stocking was tied at the back of Danielle's neck, suggesting that the perpetrator was behind her when she was strangled. The bed was disheveled, and one of the dresser drawers was open, possibly indicating that the perpetrator took the stocking from her drawer. Additionally, Danielle's purse had been rummaged through, with its contents dumped out. The police considered the possibility that the crime was a robbery that escalated into murder, but noted that valuable items such as cameras and jewelry remained untouched. The investigators considered the possibility that the perpetrator's goal was to steal from the apartment, but after encountering Danielle, decided to kill her to eliminate her as a witness. They also explored the possibility that the crime scene was staged, as the front door showed no signs of forced entry. After searching the surrounding area, they found no evidence. The sliding glass door leading to the backyard was locked and showed no signs of forced entry. Based on their findings, the investigators concluded that Danielle must have let the perpetrator involuntarily, or that the perpetrator had a key to the apartment. This led them to focus on Luis, Danielle's fiancé, as the main suspect during their questioning. Luis was very emotional about the situation, as romantic relationships can sometimes lead to intense anger and sad consequences. The interrogation began with questions about his whereabouts on the day of his fiancé's death. According to Luis, he spent the entire day at work, and the last time he saw Danielle was Danielle was when he left for work in the morning. They both left the apartment at 6:45 a.m., but Danielle returned to get something. Luis claimed that Danielle was worried about an important meeting with management that day and seemed a little distracted. He also mentioned that Danielle called him at 11:30 a.m. to ask if he wanted to go to lunch with her, but he refused because he had a lot of work to do. Luis tried to contact Danielle later that day, but she wasn't answering. He called her colleagues and learned that she had gone out for lunch but never returned. When he tried to call their home phone, Danielle didn't answer. This led him to leave work and check on her. When he arrived at their apartment, he noticed that the front door was unlocked, and he found a jar that made him nervous. During the investigation, Luis stated that they had a good relationship and were deeply in love. Luis expressed that he was depressed and felt that the police were wasting their time by interrogating him, as he believed the real culprit was still at large. Detectives interviewed Danielle's friends and family, who all confirmed that Luis could not harm Danielle, as they were planning a wedding and were in love. Luis's co-workers also confirmed that he was at work all day, which ruled out any possibility of his involvement in the crime. Luis mentioned that Danielle had been receiving excessive attention from her co-worker, Jeff, who made her uncomfortable. Investigators went to Danielle's workplace and spoke to her boss, who confirmed that Danielle had complained about Jeff's behavior. Jeff's behavior was making Danielle uncomfortable. He was touching her and interfering with her work. Danielle had made it clear that she was in a committed relationship with Luis. Despite this, Jeff continued to make Danielle feel uncomfortable. The situation was also complicated by the fact that Jeff was 40 years old, while Danielle was just 20. Danielle's co-workers reported that she left the office for lunch, but never returned, providing investigators with a timeline for when the attack occurred. This raised suspicions about Jeff, who was absent from the office during the same time frame. The investigation explored the possibility that Jeff may have attacked Danielle after she opened the front door to her home. This could explain why there were no signs of forced entry. Jeff was brought in for questioning to discuss his relationship with Danielle. During the questioning, Jeff acknowledged inviting Danielle to lunch, but denied any involvement in Danielle's death. He did admit to liking Danielle, but stated that he didn't engage in any inappropriate behavior that would justify her complaint against him. Jeff claimed that he couldn't have attacked Danielle because he had an alibi. According to Jeff, he was with another colleague all day, working on various issues and driving around the city together. This meant that it was impossible for him to have committed the crime. Jeff identified a co-worker who he claimed was with him at the time of the crime. Investigators met with this co-worker, who confirmed Jeff's alibi, thus ruling out Jeff from suspect. The autopsy report provided some insight into the circumstances of Danielle's death. The cause of death was asphyxia, indicating that Danielle was attacked by surprise. investigators concluded that the perpetrator approached her from behind and tightened the stocking until she lost consciousness. The perpetrator then tied the stocking in a knot to prevent Danielle from regaining consciousness. The lack of defensive injuries on her body suggested that Danielle did not resist the attack. In fact, the only injury on her body was the ligature mark on her neck, indicating that she may not have even seen the face of her attacker. The police investigation at the crime scene did not yield any evidence that could help identify the perpetrator. Despite a thorough search, no shoe prints, DNA, fingerprints, or hair were found. As a result, there was no evidence to send to the laboratory for analysis. Without any new leads, the police returned to their initial theory that the crime was a robbery gone wrong. The police asked Luis to re-examine the apartment with them to see if he could notice anything unusual. After a thorough examination, Luis reported that nothing seemed to be missing from the apartment and all items were in their usual places. However, a few days later, Luis contacted the police to report that he could not find Danielle's wedding ring. Luis also pointed out another unusual detail to the investigators. The stocking used to strangle Danielle did not belong to her. According to Luis, Danielle did not wear stockings, which suggested that the perpetrator had brought the stocking with them. One of her friends mentioned her ex-boyfriend Eddie, whom she started dating while pregnant. Eddie was known for his violent behavior, and as the relationship progressed, he became increasingly controlling and domineering. He eventually forbade her to see her friends and family. The relationship with Eddie continued to deteriorate after Danielle gave birth to her son. Things took a turn for the worse when Eddie started using illegal substances, and Danielle decided to end the relationship. Danielle attempted to start anew after leaving Eddie, but he refused to accept the end of their relationship. His behavior became increasingly unpredictable, prompting Danielle to obtain a restraining order against him. However, Eddie repeatedly disregarded the order. Eddie's actions escalated, with him frequently calling Danielle, parking near her home, and even appearing at her workplace. Danielle's family reported that Eddie had made numerous calls to her in the months leading up to her death, demanding that she meet with him, but she consistently hung up on him. Detectives identified Eddie as a prime suspect and brought him in for questioning. He was hostile and resistant to cooperating with the police. When discussing Danielle, his demeanor became visibly agitated. During the interrogation, Eddie's account of his relationship with Danielle contradicted the statements made by her family members. He claimed to have never been violent towards her and denied any involvement in her death, stating that he had not spoken to her in over a year. The investigators suspected that Eddie was lying to them. To verify his alibi, they checked Danielle's phone call history and discovered that Eddie had been in contact with her in the months leading up to her death. The police needed to confirm Eddie's whereabouts at the time of the attack. Eddie claimed to have been working out of state as a tow truck driver at the time of Danielle's death. He stated that he was miles away from the Ashley Lakes apartments where Danielle lived. His employer corroborated Eddie's story, providing receipts from a motel and gas stations that suggested Eddie was indeed out of state. However, 3 days after Danielle's death, the police received a new lead that changed the direction of the investigation. During an interview with residents of Ashley Lakes apartments, a woman shared a disturbing incident that had occurred a week before Danielle's death. She reported that she had been awoken by a knock on her door, but when she looked through the peephole, no one was there. She returned to bed, but a minute later, she heard her front door slam shut. She reported an incident where a maintenance man entered her apartment without permission. She stated that he was looking at her rather than performing his job, which made her feel uncomfortable. This incident led to an investigation, and the woman provided a description of the man to the police. Further investigation revealed that another woman had reported a similar incident, where a man entered her apartment claiming to need to change light bulbs, despite her apartment not needing any new bulbs. The man made a statement suggesting that he might be in the wrong apartment and then left. The management of Ashley Lake's apartments provided investigators with a list of maintenance specialists working at the complex, and only one matched the description given by the two women. This individual was identified as Calvin Oliver, a 42-year-old maintenance worker who started working at the complex in September 1998. When shown his photo, both women identified Oliver as the man who entered their apartments without permission. The investigation also revealed that Oliver had been working at the complex when a string of incidents involving stolen items occurred, including missing cash, checks, jewelry, and computers. As the investigation continued, detectives searched for potential connections between Calvin Oliver and Danielle Jennings. They discovered that Oliver had performed work in Jennings' apartment just a couple of weeks before her death. This revelation made Oliver a key person of interest in the investigation. Oliver likely knew that Danielle and her fiancé Luis would be at work during the day, allowing him to enter their apartment without raising suspicion using his master key. It's possible that Danielle returned home for lunch while Oliver was already inside. Calvin Oliver was brought in for questioning by investigators. Initially, they asked him about the thefts that some Ashley Lake's apartments residents had reported. He denied any involvement. When questioned about Danielle Jennings, Oliver claimed he had heard about what happened to her but didn't know her personally. He admitted to doing work in her apartment, but the police lacked concrete evidence linking him to the crime. Just before releasing Oliver from the police station, investigators decided to run a database check on him. The results were shocking. Oliver had an outstanding warrant in another jurisdiction for failing to appear on a burglary charge related to the theft of personal checks. Oliver had a significant criminal history, with convictions dating back to 1974, including residential burglaries, armed robbery, and sexual assault. He spent most of his life in prison, which raises the question of how he was able to get a job at Ashley Lake's apartments. This is relevant because if Oliver was in Danielle's apartment when she came in, he had a motive to hurt her to avoid going back to prison. The police detained Oliver due to an active warrant for his arrest, which gave them time to investigate his involvement in Danielle's death. As part of their investigation into the thefts at Ashley Lake's apartments, the police obtained a search warrant for Oliver's apartment. There, they found stolen belongings from other residents, as well as Danielle's wedding ring, which linked Oliver to her death. 9 days after Danielle's death, Calvin Oliver was charged with first-degree felony and burglary. After his false statement was exposed, Oliver refused to answer any more questions and chose to remain silent. During the trial, the prosecution presented a different scenario. Oliver killed Danielle after she caught him stealing at her apartment on March 14th, as she unexpectedly returned home from work. The trial lasted 5 days, and the jury delivered a guilty verdict on October 13, 2000. The court sentenced Oliver to life in prison for the murder of Danielle Jennings and an additional 20 years for stealing her wedding ring. As a result, Danielle's mother and stepfather, Sherry and Philip Jennings, gained custody of her son, Tristan. Ashley Lake's apartments was aware of Oliver's troubled past, but failed to conduct a background check on him. This lack of oversight allowed Oliver, who had spent most of his life in prison, to reside in the same apartment complex as Danielle. Danielle's family sued Ashley Lake's apartments after a series of thefts, and the murder went unreported by management. They claimed negligent hiring, inadequate security, and death. The jury returned a verdict of over $13 million, plus $2.5 million in punitive damages initially, later reduced to $250,000. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nicole Loeb. On August 19, 2014, at 5 p.m., the Portland Emergency Services received a distress call from a man reporting a woman stabbed in the chest at the Timber Creek Apartments. The victim, who was still alive but struggling to breathe, needed immediate medical attention. The eyewitness requested an ambulance be sent to the scene as soon as possible. When paramedics arrived, they found the victim. Despite the paramedics' best efforts, she succumbed to her injuries. Before passing away, she shared crucial information. The man who made the 911 call explained that he and his wife were walking down the stairs towards the parking lot when they heard a scream. He looked to his right and saw a woman running towards them, crying out, "He stabbed me! He stabbed me!" The victim told them that she didn't know her attacker, but described him as wearing camouflage pants and a black hoodie. The manager of the Timber Creek Apartments identified the victim as 29-year-old Nicole Laub, a leasing consultant who had been working at the complex for a few weeks. On August 19th, Nicole was driving a golf cart to deliver lease renewal letters to residents, along with a balloon and a popcorn package. She marked each apartment on a map as she made the deliveries. The investigation revealed that the attack likely occurred in a specific stairwell at Timber Creek, known as Breezeway. This conclusion was based on Nicole's notations and the map she had marked. It is believed that the attacker was waiting for her under the stairs, as several indicators pointed to this location, including a trail of blood drops and scattered leaflets at the foot of the stairs. During the investigation, several witnesses reported seeing a suspicious young male wearing a black hoodie and cam pants in the area around the time of the attack. By combining the reports and timelines of each sighting, detectives were able to piece together the path the suspect took into and out of Timber Creek. The Washington County Search and Rescue Team searched the woods along Cedar Mill Creek, which runs through the Timber Creek apartment complex. They found several items during their search and sent them to a laboratory to see if they were relevant to the case. The police contacted Chris Laub, Nicole's husband, to inform him of the incident. Chris and Nicole had a blended family, including 2 daughters from his previous relationships and a son together. Nicole was a strong and resilient person who had overcome cancer as a teenager. She developed a passion for fitness and bodybuilding and competed in several events. Her dream was to become a coach and help others achieve their fitness goals. The attack on Nicole was not a robbery, and Tinoco did not attempt to remove any of her clothing. This suggests that the motive behind the attack may have been personal. As a result, detectives began to focus their attention on her husband, Chris. Nicole was a beautiful woman, a loving wife, an amazing mother, and a devoted friend. She was unafraid to share her faith and opinions with others, and her goal was to make the world a better place. Her legacy lives on, and it's clear that she achieved her goal. She touched the lives of everyone in the room in ways that will have a lasting impact. The police interviewed residents of the Timber Creek Apartments and found 2 witnesses who saw a man in a black hoodie and cam pants matching the suspect's description running across the road during the time of the attack. The witnesses saw the man running towards the houses across the street from the Timber Creek Apartments, not looking around, and with a hood over his head. Using the witnesses' descriptions, detectives created a sketch of the suspect and quickly distributed it throughout the city. A sketch of the suspect was shown on TV. Detectives also worked with informants, gathering several potential leads, including one from a man whose son knew someone named Taylor. According to the man who reported Taylor, he had been threatening people with a knife in recent weeks. The police located Taylor and brought him in for questioning. During the questioning, investigators found his statements unusual and suspected he might be suffering from a mental illness. When asked about Nicole Laub, he openly admitted to taking her life. However, Taylor's confession was inconsistent, repeating information from the news and inventing unrelated details. As a result, police excluded him from their list of suspects. Another potential lead emerged involving a man named Nick, who had a history of crime. Nick had some physical characteristics similar to the suspect in the sketch, but his past behavior didn't suggest he was capable of a crime like the one committed against Nicole. Despite having a history of run-ins with the law, Nick had never been known to physically harm anyone. When police brought Nick in for questioning, he denied any involvement in the crime and requested a lawyer. The police then obtained a search warrant for Nick's home, where they found a black hoodie and camouflage pants. However, the hoodie didn't match the witness's description because it had a prominent white logo on the front. The police sent the clothes to a lab for further analysis, but experts found no evidence linking them to the crime. The police obtained Nick's mobile phone records, which provided conclusive evidence that he was not at the crime scene when Nicole was attacked. This eliminated Nick as a suspect, leaving the investigation at a dead end. 3 weeks after Nicole's death, on September 13, 2014, the Eugene Police Department received a call came from Eugene, the second largest city in Oregon. On the night of the 13th, Heather Miller, a 39-year-old woman, was attacked as she was leaving a bar near Autzen Stadium after watching a game. Tinoco, identified as Jamie Tinoco, was publicly named by the police, who released his photo in the hopes that other victims would come forward. Detectives investigating the death of Nicole Laub noticed a resemblance between Tinoco's photo and their suspect sketch. Further investigation revealed that Tinoco lived with his parents in an apartment directly across from the Timber Creek apartment complex where Laub had died. This geographical proximity strengthened the suspicion that Tinoco might be responsible for her death. Detectives questioned Tinoco about his potential involvement in Laub's death, hoping he would confess, just as he had done in a separate case involving Heather Miller. However, Tinoco denied any involvement in Laub's death and refused to cooperate. As a result, the police had to gather evidence to link Tinoco to the crime. With his parents' apartment located directly across from the Timber Creek complex, the police obtained a search warrant. During the search, they found a black hoodie and cam pants in Tinoco's room, which they sent to the lab for analysis. The lab report results with no DNA match found. While there's no concrete evidence linking Tinoco to Nicole's death, he's clearly responsible for attacking Heather Miller and showed no remorse, even taking pride in his actions during his trial. In a new interrogation, investigators used Tinoco's ego to their advantage, suggesting that if he confessed to Nicole Laub's murder, he would gain respect from other inmates in prison. The detective implied that owning up to the crime would make him appear more formidable, rather than just a coward who attacked a woman from behind. After a brief silence, Tinoco began to open up about Nicole. He claimed that he didn't intend to kill her, but rather wanted to experience the feeling of stabbing someone. According to Tinoco, his goal was to hurt Nicole, not take her life. He described how he had seen Nicole parking a golf cart and carrying a balloon in a small package to an apartment on the second floor of Timber Creek, which is located near his apartment. Nicole was attacked when she went upstairs and then came back down. Tinoco hid behind a golf cart, then ran to the stairs and stabbed Nicole when she descended. He chose Nicole because she seemed like an easy target. When questioned about his intentions, he admitted that he had considered forcing Nicole into a sexual act, just as he had done with Heather Miller. However, he claimed that he didn't follow through with this plan because Nicole screamed loudly after being stabbed, prompting him to flee the scene. During a reenactment of the crime, Tinoco demonstrated how he escaped from the scene. Chris Laub, Nicole's husband, was shocked to learn that the person responsible for his wife's death was only 17 years old. As a father of a 13-year-old daughter, Laub found it incomprehensible that someone just 4 years older than his daughter could commit such a heinous crime. The trial started in 2015. Tinoco confessed to the crime during the interrogation, but he claimed he was innocent in court. His lawyer argued that there was no DNA evidence linking Tinoco to the crime scene. The lawyer asked for mercy for Tinoco, who was 17 years old and severely mentally ill, and hoped that treatment could help him change his behavior. The defense presented only one witness, a psychologist who evaluated Tinoco and found that he exhibited symptoms of schizophrenia. However, another psychologist from the Oregon State Hospital disagreed, saying that Tinoco had a personality disorder, not schizophrenia. The jury was convinced of Tinoco's guilt after watching a video of his confession and an experiment where he recreated his actions at the time of the crime. Jamie Tinoco provided details during a reenactment of Nicole Laub's crime that only the perpetrator would know. This led to a guilty verdict on all counts in 2017. The jury was tasked with deciding Tinoco's sentence, choosing between life without parole or life with the possibility of parole after 30 years. However, they found insufficient mitigating circumstances to warrant the option of parole, resulting in a sentence of life without parole. Before the official sentencing, Circuit Judge Kirsten Thompson allowed Tinoco to speak. With his attorneys by his side, Tinoco apologized and asked for forgiveness. Chris Laub, Nicole's husband, recalled that Tinoco's family approached them after the sentencing to offer condolences and apologize. However, in 2021, the Oregon Court of Appeals overturned Tinoco's conviction, citing changes in juvenile laws. At the time of the crime, Tinoco was automatically referred to adult court due to the nature of the offense. New reforms now allow for offenders between 15 and 17 years old to be tried in juvenile court, rather than being automatically referred to adult court. A new law requires prosecutors to request a hearing to decide if a juvenile's serious crime case should be moved to adult court. This change affects the overturned conviction of Tinoco in the Nicole Laub case. Although Tinoco remains in prison, his defense may try to reduce his sentence if he's retried and reconvicted. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Amanda Plass. Amanda Lynn Plass was born on December 11, 1990, in Choppy, Massachusetts, where she grew up with her sister Emily and brother Nicholas. Her mother, Michelle Myers, described Amanda as a free-spirited individual who often seemed out of place in the present time. In 2011, Amanda was working as a waitress at a local restaurant in Choppy and was in a relationship with a 27-year-old carpenter named Seth Green. Tragedy struck on August 26, 2011. Seth called 911 and reported that he had found Amanda lying unresponsive in the kitchen of her apartment. When police and paramedics arrived, they found that Amanda was already deceased from multiple stab wounds to her chest, throat, and abdomen. The scene was immediately cordoned off and investigations were initiated. Seth was found sitting on the porch, visibly distressed and emotional. Detectives carefully searched Amanda's apartment for evidence, but the perpetrator had managed to escape the scene. The investigation was ongoing, with the goal of identifying the person responsible for Amanda's murder and bringing them to justice. Detectives began their investigation at the crime scene, where they found a significant amount of blood splatter in the kitchen, indicating that this was where the attack occurred. The evidence suggested that a knife was the likely murder weapon, and it was taken by the perpetrator. Further analysis revealed visible shoe prints from Nike sneakers on the floor and broken window glass, bearing a palm print in one of the rooms. Given the type and number of wounds on Amanda's body, detectives suspected that the perpetrator was someone Amanda knew, and the motive was likely a personal vendetta. As a result, they brought Amanda's boyfriend, Seth Green, in for questioning at the police station. When Seth arrived at the police station, he appeared visibly shaken, overcome with emotion over the loss of his girlfriend. The investigators were interested in determining his emotional response. During the interrogation, Seth explained that he had spent the entire day at work and had planned to give Amanda a ride to her workplace, but was unable to do so due to his own work schedule. Seth had a limited relationship with Amanda, but he loved her and had no motive to harm her. As a carpenter, Seth used various tools at work, including a knife on his tool belt. However, he consistently left his tools at work after his shift, and this day was no exception. After finishing his work, Seth changed his clothes, left his tools behind, and went to meet Amanda. He understood why he was the main suspect, but he denied any involvement in her death. The police investigation confirmed Seth's alibi, and he passed a polygraph test. Additionally, the boots he was wearing when the police arrived didn't match the Nike sneakers found at the crime scene, further ruling out his involvement. Amanda's tragic death led to a complex investigation. Initially, the police explored the possibility that her ex-boyfriend was involved, but further inquiry ruled him out as a suspect. He provided a DNA sample and fingerprints, which did not match the evidence found at the crime scene. Moreover, he had a solid alibi, eliminating him from the list of potential perpetrators. The family's pain deepened when they found out that some police officers had taken photos of Amanda's body while the state police were on their way to the crime scene. These officers shared the disturbing images with other officers and civilians, breaking the family's trust with the authorities and adding to their emotional pain. The case remained stagnant for approximately 2 years until investigators decided to review the evidence again. During this review, a crucial clue was discovered on a dry erase board in Amanda's bedroom. The message, "Dennis was here 8/11, had gone unnoticed until then. Considering the date, this message became significant. It was just 15 days before Amanda's body was discovered in her apartment. The revelation sparked questions. Who was Dennis, and was he connected to Amanda's death? The police had not come across this name throughout the entire investigation. Detectives analyzed Amanda's phone records and social media posts to see if she had any connections to someone named Dennis. Amanda's ex-boyfriend reported to the police that her apartment had been broken into several times when she was not home. Amanda suspected a young man whose name started with the letter D. She knew this man and wanted to resolve the issue peacefully, so she decided to talk to him first. During their meeting, Amanda tried to discuss the break-ins, but the man denied any involvement. When Amanda mentioned that a neighbor had seen him in her apartment, she politely asked him to return her stolen belongings. However, the man left. The investigation then focused on identifying the man named Dennis, who was suspected of being involved in Amanda's death. The police found a man named Dennis Rosa Roman living 3 blocks from the scene of the crime. A background check revealed that Dennis had a history of breaking and entering. Although there was no palm print to match the one found at Amanda's home, the police still wanted to question Dennis. They located him in Westfield, Massachusetts, and invited him to the station for an informal conversation. However, Dennis declined the invitation. But in November 2013, Dennis voluntarily visited the police station. The police questioned Dennis about his relationship with Amanda, and he acknowledged knowing her from Chappie, but claimed he hadn't seen her in a couple of years, which was true since Amanda had been deceased for a couple of years. When asked if he had ever visited Amanda's apartment, Dennis denied ever being there and stated that he didn't know her well. He admitted to occasionally selling weed to Amanda, which was how they occasionally interacted. During the interrogation, Dennis agreed to provide a DNA swab and revealed the size of his shoes, which matched the one found at the crime scene. However, the police noted that Dennis's Nike Air Max shoes had a different tread pattern than the ones that left bloody tracks at the crime scene. After providing his DNA, Dennis refused to answer further questions, promising to return to the police station in a few days to continue the conversation. Initially, the police didn't have sufficient grounds to arrest Dennison, so he was released. This decision was made despite concerns that he might flee and hinder the investigation. Further investigation revealed that Amanda and Dennis had made several phone calls to each other on July 28, 2011. The phone records showed that Amanda initiated 4 calls, while Dennis initiated 5 calls. When Dennis returned to the police station a few days later, his story changed. He now claimed that he had communicated with Amanda about break-ins at her apartment when she wasn't home. Amanda didn't report the incidents because nothing of value was stolen. The investigators found this story unconvincing, particularly since they had heard about the alleged break-ins multiple times before. Their suspicions grew, and they strongly suspected that Dennis was actually the person responsible for breaking into Amanda's apartment. As Rosa Roman continued to alter his initial statement, the investigators became more confident that he was hiding something crucial to the case. The priority shifted to uncovering the truth about his involvement in Amanda's death and determining what secrets he was trying to conceal. When investigators showed Dennis a photo of a dry erase board with the message, "Dennis was here," on August 11, 2011, he initially admitted to writing it, contradicting his previous statement that he had never entered Amanda's apartment. This admission was significant, as it directly implicated him in the crime. Furthermore, DNA results confirmed that Dennis had given false testimony, as his DNA matched the DNA found under Amanda's fingernails, and his palm print was found on a glass at the crime scene. After realizing that the police had gathered sufficient evidence for his arrest, Dennis changed his story for the third time. He now claimed that he had been present at the crime scene and had attempted to save Amanda from the attacker. However, he refused to name the alleged attacker, citing concerns for his and his family's safety. Instead, he provided a detailed description of the person he claimed was responsible for Amanda's death. Dennis described the alleged attacker as a tall, white, light-skinned individual with blue eyes, weighing between 170 and 200 pounds. He also claimed that the person was wearing old pants, dirty boots, and a t-shirt with the phrase, "Why drink and drive when you can smoke and fly?" Despite this new information, detectives did not believe Dennis's story, as all the evidence pointed to him as the sole perpetrator of the crime. As a result, Dennis was arrested and charged with Amanda's murder. The trial took place almost 3 years after Amanda's death and centered around the debate over whether Dennis was responsible for her murder. His lawyers presented the argument that although Dennis was at the crime scene, he did not commit the murder. Instead, they accused the police of botching the investigation and framing Dennis after their efforts to find the perpetrator failed. Dennis claimed that his involvement in Amanda's death was involuntary. He stated that his dealer forced him to collect a debt at her apartment. Dennis allegedly tried to help Amanda, but couldn't stop the dealer. He cited his DNA under her nails as evidence, saying she grabbed his hand during the incident. In contrast, the prosecutors had a different explanation for the events leading to Amanda's death. They believed that Dennis was breaking into Amanda's apartment while she was not home and that she had caught him. During one of these break-ins, Dennis allegedly left an inscription with his name on a board. Amanda assumed that Dennis was the trespasser who had stolen from her, and that is why she called him and asked him to return the stolen items. This explained the multiple phone calls between Amanda and Dennis on the day she died. Dennis, the killer of Amanda, mistakenly believed Amanda was already at work, re-entered her apartment, and ultimately took her life in a fit of anger during a dispute. A jury convicted Dennis of the crime after 8 days of testimony and 5 hours of deliberation. Dennis received a life sentence in prison with no possibility of parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Christina Ann and Thompson Harris. Christina Ann Thompson, 30, and Jason Thomas Harris, 40, had been married since 2003 after dating for about 5 years. They had their first child in 2009, and their lives changed significantly. Despite the challenges of everyday life, they seemed happy with their new life as parents. Christina took care of their child and the household, while Jason worked at a plastics factory. As their child grew up, Christina had the opportunity to contribute to the family budget by getting a job. However, in May 2014, she had to take maternity leave as she was expecting her second child. On September 29, 2014, Jason left for work and exchanged a few words with Christina, who was not feeling well due to a cold. Despite her poor health, she assured Jason that she was okay. A few hours later, Jason called his wife to check on her, but she didn't answer the phone. This sparked worry in Jason, as he couldn't understand why Christina wasn't answering his calls. Jason couldn't reach Christina, so he asked a neighbor to check on her. He told the neighbor that Christina was sick and wasn't answering her phone. The neighbor went to the house, knocked on the door, and called out to Christina, but no one answered. Since the door was unlocked, the neighbor went inside and found Christina lying on the bed. She couldn't wake Christina up, so she called 911 and then got a neighbor who was a registered nurse to help. The nurse checked Christina's pulse and confirmed that she had passed away. On September 29, 2014, 4 months after giving birth to her second child, Christina was found dead in her house. When the police arrived, Jason was already there. He told them that Christina was sick and he had left her alone in the morning. 2 days later, the medical examiner determined that Christina's death was caused by an overdose of a prohibited substance. This news shocked her family and friends. Christina, a mother of 2 young children, was found dead, and many people who knew her were shocked. They claimed she had never used illegal substances. Her mother, Kathy May, reported to the police that Christina was fine when she saw her the day before her death, contradicting her husband Jason's statement that Christina was struggling with a cold. Kathy May also revealed that Christina described her marriage to Jason as complicated. Jason was unhappy in the marriage, but didn't want a divorce because he didn't want to pay child support or lose custody of their children. The neighbors who discovered Christina's body shared some information with the police. Apparently, Jason told them that on the evening before Christina's death, he made her cereal with milk, and while eating, she lost consciousness and dropped the plate. The police understood that it was hard for Christina's loved ones to accept that someone they knew well might have a hidden dark side. However, as the investigation progressed, the police began to doubt that Christina had used any illegal substances. Christina's family refused to give up, and they didn't believe the story. Christina's family, particularly her mother and sisters, urged the police to test her breast milk for evidence. Initially, the police delayed this request for 48 hours, but the family's persistence eventually led them to comply. This marked the first time in Michigan's history that breast milk was used as evidence in a case. Tests conducted at her workplace and the hospital where she gave birth to her second child came back negative for prohibited substances. At the time of her death, her second child was just 4 months old, and Christina was still breastfeeding both children. According to her husband, Harris, and her mother, Christina was meticulous about what she consumed because she was breastfeeding and wanted to ensure her baby's health and safety. Christina had been pumping and storing her breast milk in a freezer, with some of the frozen milk stored at her mother's house. Investigators tested 3 bags of breast milk for prohibited substances, using the dates on the bags to determine which ones were frozen before her death. The results showed no traces of banned substances in any of the milk samples. This finding suggested that Christina had not taken the substance that caused her death. Only one person, Jason's sister, had claimed that Christina had used banned substances. This statement led investigators to take a closer look at Jason and consider the possibility that Christina's death was intentional. The investigation was slow, and it's unclear how it would have progressed without the active involvement of Christina's family. Her mother, Kathy May, kept in close contact with the Davidson police, reminding them about her daughter's case. In August 2016, almost 2 years after Christina's death, Kathy May was able to get the Davidson police to turn the case over to the Michigan State Police. With new investigators on the case, the story began to unfold, revealing more information about Jason Harris's behavior before and after his wife's death. Harris was involved in multiple extramarital affairs, and Christina was aware of these infidelities. She had confided in family members and co-workers about the situation, including the fact that Harris was texting another woman while she was in the hospital giving birth to their youngest child. Christina had expressed concerns about her safety, telling a coworker that if she died, Harris would be the one responsible. When asked if she was serious, she confirmed that she was. Harris had made public statements that questioned the paternity of their second child and had complained about Christina's behavior after giving birth, saying she was depressed and refusing to work. He also complained about her nagging him. A co-worker of Harris's reported that he had made disturbing comments about Christina, including expressing a desire for her death. This co-worker described the relationship between Harris and Christina as toxic, citing frequent arguments between them. The most alarming aspect of this case is that Harris was open about his desire to get rid of Christina, and he even took steps to harm her. Unfortunately, his words and actions were not taken seriously until it was too late. Harris had attempted to poison Christina on at least 2 occasions by mixing substances into her drinks. Fortunately, Christina was able to detect the unusual taste and avoided drinking the beverages. Harris asked a coworker for a substance that would not affect the taste or smell of food and drinks, explaining that he wanted to poison Christina so she wouldn't feel anything. When he told another coworker that Christina didn't drink the water with the substance because it tasted funny, the coworker refused to give him more pills. A coworker testified that Harris told him he wanted to stop Christina from nagging him, but the coworker thought he was joking. Harris also told a coworker that he had hired someone to kill Christina, but the person was arrested before they could carry out the task. Harris then asked the coworker to kill Christina in exchange for $10,000, which would be paid from a $100,000 life insurance policy Christina had through her employer. The coworker refused the offer, believing that Harris was just venting his emotions and that the offer to kill Christina was a joke. He remembered the conversation as Harris saying something like, "I'm tired of her. I'm going to get rid of her." Back to the case, the 911 operator asked the neighbor who found Christina's body if there were any needles at the scene, but the neighbor did not see any. The neighbor, a registered nurse, testified that Christina's body was cold and stiff, had no pulse, and had a white foamy substance coming from her mouth. The neighbor did not attempt to resuscitate Christina because she was already dead. The paramedics who responded to the scene confirmed that Christina was dead. Harris told his supervisor that he had asked a neighbor to check on Christina and that he had to go home because she was unresponsive. However, witnesses reported that Harris did not appear concerned or in a hurry when he arrived at the house. Harris entered the house without speaking to the neighbor he had asked to check on Christina. Later that morning, Harris contacted Christina's supervisor at work and informed her of Christina's death. He also inquired about collecting the $100,000 life insurance policy benefit that Christina had through her job. One of the women Harris was in a relationship with told investigators that Harris contacted her on the day of Christina's death and said that his wife had died from taking too much of a banned substance. This suggests that Harris knew the cause of Christina's death before the medical examiner's report was released. Harris shared some details about the night before Christina's death, including her restless sleep, frequent coughing, and unusual comment about the chemical taste of her water. He later visited her workplace to inquire about life insurance proceeds, collecting a $20,000 death benefit and raising suspicions with his actions. A mistress also moved in with him and his children, either before or after her funeral. The mistress stated that Jason Harris's adult children from a previous marriage moved into the house just days after Christina's death. Police also found that Jason Harris had bought an airline ticket to Rhode Island 9 days after Christina's death to visit a woman he had exchanged over 5,800 texts with. The county medical examiner, Dr. Brian Hunter, submitted post-mortem blood and urine samples for testing. Although the test results were consistent with a lethal dose of the substance, there was no evidence of how the substance was administered, as there were no injection marks on her body and no powder residues or rolling paper were found near the scene of her death. Michigan State Police took over the investigation in 2016. Dr. Hunter changed the manner of death from accidental to homicide after a wrongful death action. Jason Harris was charged with first-degree murder and others. His bail was denied. Harris pleaded not guilty and will contest the charges. The prosecution eliminated the possibility of injection as the cause of death because there were no injection marks or a needle found at the scene. Dr. Judge testified that it was unlikely the substance was inhaled through the nose because there was no evidence of a rolled dollar bill or paper used for snorting. When given the opportunity to speak, Jason Harris did not apologize or express remorse. Instead, he claimed he was innocent. The jury did not believe his claims and found him guilty of the charges against him. On November 17, 2021, the jury delivered a guilty verdict for 47-year-old Harris. 3 weeks later, the court sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kira Steger. Kira Steger was born on November 19, 1982, in Des Plaines, Illinois, to parents Marcy and Jay Steger. They remembered her as a vibrant, dedicated, and kind-hearted person. At the time of her disappearance, Kira worked at 2 stores in the Mall of America, Wet Seal and Delia's. Her co-workers were not only close friends, but also like family to her. Kira had a remarkable ability to recognize people's hidden strengths and had a promising future ahead of her. However, her life took a tragic turn when she mysteriously vanished on February 21, 2013. On the day she disappeared, Kira had a shift at work and was looking forward to a dinner date with her husband, Jeffrey Trevino, at a nice restaurant after her shift ended. Kira and Jeffrey had met 3 years prior and quickly fell in love, eventually getting married. To those around them, they appeared to be a happy and stable couple, with only occasional disagreements that they kept private. Neither their relatives, friends, nor co-workers were aware of any significant issues in their relationship. On Saturday, February 23rd, Kira's co-workers became concerned when she failed to show up to work. She was known for being punctual, strict, and adhering to her schedule. When they couldn't reach Kira, they called her husband Jeffrey. According to Jeffrey, Kira had left their house the previous morning and hadn't returned. While this wasn't entirely unusual, as Kira would occasionally spend the night at a friend's or relative's house without warning, the severe snowstorm that day was a cause for concern. Jeffrey speculated that Kira's car might have gotten stuck and her phone battery could have died, leaving her unable to communicate. Jeffrey filed a missing persons report for his wife Kira after not hearing from her, and he also contacted her family to inform them of her disappearance. Her family was shocked and deeply disturbed by the news. Upon receiving the report, detectives launched an investigation into Kira's disappearance. As is standard procedure, they began by questioning Jeffrey and searching the surrounding area. Detectives visited Jeffrey at his home to ask him about Kira's disappearance. He told them that on the previous Thursday, he and Kira had spent time together, having dinner, talking, bowling, and then leaving the mall. According to Jeffrey, they went straight home after that, where Kira planned to watch a movie. Jeffrey also reported that Kira left their house the following Friday morning around 8:30 a.m. to attend a mandatory work event. He stated that Kira was acting normally and didn't appear to be behaving strangely before she left. Jeffrey wasn't concerned about Kira's frequent disappearances, despite not knowing her whereabouts. They had minor relationship issues, but Jeffrey didn't consider them serious. When questioned, he dismissed the possibility of Kira having a lover, citing a previous conversation where she denied it. Jeffrey claimed to trust and love his wife. Investigators relayed information to patrol units and visited the Mall of America to verify Jeffrey's testimony. The Mall of America in Bloomington is one of the largest shopping malls in the world. As such, The mall is equipped with multiple security cameras. Detectives investigated Kira's disappearance by reviewing the footage from the time she left work on February 21st. The footage showed nothing unusual. Jeffrey's account was confirmed, as the footage showed that he met Kira after work, and they spent time together at the mall before leaving. There were no signs of arguments or trouble. Kira's family was struggling with her disappearance, and their anxiety grew as the days passed. They decided to take action and travel to Bloomington to help with the investigation. They created flyers with her picture and posted them around town, hoping to attract attention to the search. The investigators questioned neighbors and obtained footage from a security camera that partially captured Kira and Jeffrey's home. Kira's cell phone records also became available, revealing a significant new lead. A man named Ryan Wendt, a manager at a store where Kira worked, with whom she had a long-term and intense relationship. Police investigated Ryan after learning he'd traveled out of state during Kira's disappearance, raising suspicions due to his past romantic relationship with her and their concurrent out-of-state moves. Detectives sought to determine whether his actions were coincidental or incriminating. The detectives managed to locate Ryan in Colorado and asked him to answer questions. During the questioning, Ryan stated that he had last been in contact with Kira via text messages while driving through South Dakota. He said these messages were sent shortly before Kira disappeared. The police analyzed the timing of these messages and discovered that Kira had been texting with Ryan while she was having dinner with Jeffrey. It was clear that Kira was distancing herself from Jeffrey. The investigators examined Ryan's phone and credit card records to verify his location. Their analysis indicated that Ryan was indeed out of state that evening and had no connection to Kira's disappearance. Based on this information, Ryan was eliminated as a suspect. Further analysis of the messages revealed that Kira had been texting with Ryan even after she returned home with Jeffrey. However, her phone activity ceased at 11:44 p.m., and she has not been active since. A team of investigators reviewed video footage from a surveillance camera at Kira's neighbor's house. The camera's rapid movement made it difficult to observe, but it did capture Jeffrey and Kira's house for a few seconds. According to Jeffrey, they returned home after dinner and bowling, watched a movie, and went to bed. However, the footage showed Kira's car backing into the yard at 2 a.m. and driving away, despite the poor video quality and constant motion. Jeffrey claimed he drove to the gas station to fill up Kira's car, as she had asked him to do before her commute the next day. His alibi checked out, as he was indeed seen at the gas station around 3:30 a.m. However, after leaving the gas station, he didn't return home. Instead, he headed towards the highway, but his exact destination is unknown. Although a neighbor's camera didn't capture him returning home, it's possible he may have arrived when the camera was facing a different direction. Kira's Chevrolet was seen leaving her residence at 9:21 a.m., but the driver's identity couldn't be determined. A missing person report was filed on February 23rd. On February 25th, police received a call about a suspicious vehicle near Kira's workplace. The vehicle had been parked in a multi-story parking lot for several days and was found with suspicious red smudges on the trunk lid. Kira's white Chevy was found with signs of a tragic event, including a few small bloodstains. Her purse, containing divorce court forms, was recovered from the vehicle. A rolled-up trunk mat with dark stains, later confirmed to be her blood, was discovered behind the car. The car left the house at 9:21 a.m. and was captured on camera at the mall 20 minutes later. Unfortunately, there was no camera in the parking lot where the car was eventually found, but there was a camera that captured footage of the path leading to the car. After reviewing the footage, detectives noticed a man wearing a hoodie, which was not unusual given the cold weather, walking after the car had entered the parking lot. The man crossed the street and approached a taxi stand, where he had a brief conversation with a driver before getting into the car and driving off. the police were able to identify the taxi company and determine which car the man had ridden in by tracking the time of the interaction. Since the cabs were equipped with GPS tracking devices, the police were able to determine that the man ended his trip a block away from Kira and Jeffrey's house and paid for the ride in cash before getting out of the car. As the cab drove away from the neighborhood, it was caught on camera by the same surveillance camera that had partially captured Kira and Jeffrey's residence. 2 minutes later, a man wearing a hoodie with a distinctive white logo entered the camera's frame. Although the poor video quality made it hard to discern his face, investigators suspected that the man was likely Jeffrey, given that Kira was missing and the man with the hooded sweatshirt was seen entering Kira and Jeffrey's house. Law enforcement officers executed a search warrant and visited the house, finding numerous dark red stains in the bedroom, including nearly 100 on the mattress. After rearranging and cleaning the room, investigators used luminol to reveal additional stains on the carpet that were not visible to the naked eye. The stains, which originated in the bedroom, were confirmed to be Kira's blood, leading investigators to believe she was likely no longer alive. A search of Jeffrey's car found no blood or signs of a struggle, but a gas station receipt indicated a purchase was made with his card 1 hour and 40 minutes before Kira's car was abandoned. Detectives went to the gas station to review the security footage. The footage showed Jeffrey filling up his car and then going inside to withdraw cash from an ATM. This gave them a clear view of Jeffrey's face and revealed a logo on his jacket that matched the one seen on the man in the earlier footage. Based on this new evidence and the evidence found at the house, 39-year-old Jeffrey Trevino was arrested. He was taken to the police station for questioning and became the main suspect. Jeffrey contacted his attorney during the interrogation and was advised to remain silent. The police had enough evidence to charge him, but needed to find Kira's body to prove his guilt. After months of searching by the police, Kira's family and volunteers, a suspicious bag was found by the side of the road at Keller Lake, near Trevino's house, as the snow began to melt in late March. A bag containing a bloodied pillow, shirt, and bra was discovered, and forensic analysis revealed that the items had Kira's DNA on them. Although the search of the lake was hindered by the presence of ice, divers searched the water body, but unfortunately, no remains were found. The area around the lake was also thoroughly searched using 4 trained search dogs, but these efforts were unsuccessful. 2.5 months after Kira's disappearance, a disturbing call on May 8, 2013, led police to a body in the Mississippi River. Body was identified through dental records as Kira Steger, with severe blunt force trauma and a fractured index finger, making her exact cause of death impossible to determine due to decomposition. To uncover the truth, investigators worked to rebuild the sequence of events surrounding Kira's death. Their theory was as follows. When Kira and Jeffrey arrived home, he discovered that she was texting someone else, which made him suspicious. Kira refused to let him see the messages, leading Jeffrey to violently take her phone and break her finger in the process. Upon reading the romantic messages, Jeffrey's anger intensified, ultimately driving him to kill Kira. After committing the crime, he attempted to erase any evidence of his wrongdoing. Jeffrey used Kira's car to transport her body to a house, where he put it in the trunk. He then stopped at a gas station before driving to a river, where he disposed of the body. On his way back home, he threw away a bag containing Kira's pillow and clothes. The next day, he went to a gas station to withdraw cash from an ATM, knowing he would need it to pay for a taxi after abandoning Kira's car in a mall parking lot. After getting rid of the car, Jeffrey returned home and spent the rest of the day cleaning the house. Jeffrey's goal was to make it seem like Kira had driven away from her car on her own that morning and was unharmed. However, surveillance footage foiled his plan. In October 2013, a jury found Jeffrey Trevino guilty, agreeing that his actions were not planned in advance, but rather the result of a heated argument that escalated into violence after he discovered Kira's infidelity. Jeffrey Trevino was sentenced to 27.5 years in prison in November 2013. He will be eligible for parole in 2031. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michelle Davis. Michelle Ann Corner was born on December 15, 1966 in Iowa. By 2008, she was a 41-year-old mother of 3 living in Des Moines. Her divorce from her husband, Randy Davis, was nearly finalized, and she had taken steps towards starting anew. Michelle had moved into her own apartment and obtained a restraining order against Randy. This marked a significant turning point in her life. However, the years leading up to the divorce were tumultuous for the family. Michelle, described as friendly and adventurous, with a passion for motorcycles, she was a respected and authoritative secretary at a trucking company. On September 11, 2008, Michelle having finally escaped the burdens of her troubled marriage. Colleagues noted the change in her demeanor since her separation. Michelle left work around 4:30 p.m., but her newfound freedom was short-lived. Just after she left, 911 operators began receiving calls about an accident on Interstate 235. A Mercury Sable was found upside down, with Michelle, still wearing her seatbelt, unconscious in the driver's seat. Paramedics rushed to the scene, but sadly couldn't save her. Michelle Davis was pronounced dead. After arriving at the scene, the police initially believed that Michelle lost control of her vehicle, resulting in an accident. However, they quickly ruled out this theory the next day. Forensic experts determined that Michelle's death was not caused by injuries sustained during the rollover, but rather by a gunshot wound to the head. The bullet was extracted and sent for analysis in the hopes of identifying the perpetrator. As they waited for the results of the ballistic examination, local authorities took precautions to ensure public safety. They considered the possibility that Michelle was a random victim and that the shooter might strike again. To address concerns, the police increased patrols in the area. Once it was clear that Michelle's death was not an accident, detectives revisited the crime scene to search for clues. Unfortunately, their efforts yielded no results, as they found neither the cartridge case nor any other evidence to aid in the investigation. The police initially thought Michelle was the victim of a car accident, so the traffic services cleared the site, potentially destroying any evidence. Despite this, the detectives remained hopeful that they could still find answers by reviewing traffic camera recordings. These recordings often help solve cases, and this one was no exception. The investigators started studying the recordings from the traffic cameras, focusing on the one closest to the crime scene. They rewound the recording to the time when people started calling 911. After half an hour, they found what they were looking for. The video showed Michelle's car lying upside down, but the footage was of poor quality, resembling a slideshow with separate pictures and intervals between them. Michelle Davis's family was shocked when investigators revealed her death was not an accident. Her father, Michael Lee Corner, was particularly devastated, having lost another daughter, Cheryl Sue, in 1965, at just 1 year old, and now dealing with the loss of a second child. Michelle's family described her life as having changed significantly in recent times. Despite having no financial problems, they suspected that her husband, Randy Davis, might have been involved in her death. Their divorce was almost finalized, and Michelle had filed a restraining order against Randy. This revelation led the investigators to consider Randy as a potential suspect. Meanwhile, another detective spoke with Michelle's colleagues at her workplace and discovered that she had been in a close relationship with a man named Matt Jorgensen, who was also a colleague. This new information added another suspect to the investigation, as the police sought to understand the complex circumstances surrounding Michelle's death. According to Michelle's friend, Michelle and Matt Jorgensen had mutual feelings for each other. However, since Michelle was going through a divorce from Randy Davis, they kept their relationship private only sharing it with close friends and colleagues. When investigators spoke with Matt, he openly discussed his relationship with Michelle and provided a detailed account of his whereabouts on the day of her death. He claimed they never had any arguments or fights. The police verified his alibi, and he was subsequently eliminated as a suspect. The ballistic examination revealed that the murder weapon was a .22 caliber rifle, and experts determined that the shot was fired at close range. Given that the crime occurred on the interstate, the police believed the shooter was likely in another vehicle that was driving alongside Michelle's car. This new information led to the emergence of a new suspect in the case. The police received a tip from Michelle's insurance company that her brother Todd was seeking payment, raising suspicions of a life insurance-motivated crime. A detective visited Todd's house to investigate. When the detective started asking Todd about his whereabouts on the day of Michelle's death, Todd realized he was a suspect. He explained that he was in a different part of the city at the time of her death, and that the family was struggling financially. Todd said he had turned to the insurance company because he needed the money to pay for Michelle's funeral. The police verified Todd's alibi and found that he was not in the area where Michelle was killed. This ruled him out as a suspect, but Todd provided information that led the police to investigate another suspect, Josh. Josh was the son of Randy from a previous marriage and was an adult at the time of Michelle's death. A Marine named Josh had recently returned home from the Army when a tragic event occurred. Michelle was fatally wounded in a car incident, and the police considered Josh a suspect due to his military background. As the investigation continued, a woman reported witnessing something on Interstate 235 on the same day and time as the incident. A witness reported seeing a red Ford F-150 pickup truck driven by a white man in a baseball cap who was driving erratically, swerving between lanes, and appeared to be chasing someone. This new information led investigators to re-examine traffic camera footage, focusing on finding a red pickup truck in the area. The footage confirmed the witness's account, showing a red pickup truck following Michelle from her workplace. Although the footage was not clear enough to reveal the driver's face or the truck's license plate, further review of other camera recordings revealed that the truck was consistently following Michelle's route, staying close behind her as she approached the location of her death. This evidence suggested that the perpetrator likely fired the fatal shot from the truck while driving. Detectives investigating Michelle's death had several suspects in mind and soon discovered that her husband, Randy Davis, owned a red pickup truck. They immediately visited his house, but found only his son, Josh, who was a Marine trained in handling weapons and had access to his father's vehicle. Josh claimed that on the day of Michelle's death, he went shopping with his sister and then spent the evening at home watching TV. However, detectives found Josh's alibi suspicious. According to Josh, the divorce proceedings between Michelle and his father were challenging, partly due to Michelle's demand for half the house's value. Josh also stated that his father arrived home around 5:30 p.m. that day. The conversation with Josh revealed that he might have had a motive for the crime, as he was upset about Michelle trying to take part of his inheritance during the divorce. This led detectives to view Josh as a potential suspect with a possible motive. Meanwhile, the police canvassed shops and gas stations along the route from Michelle's workplace to the crime scene, hoping to find additional surveillance footage. Their efforts paid off when they discovered crucial footage at a store just a few miles from Michelle's workplace. On September 11, 2008, the day Michelle died, a red pickup truck arrived at the store at around 4 p.m. The truck was registered to Randy Davis. The police needed to determine who was driving it that day. Security footage showed the driver getting out of the truck and entering the store, but the poor video quality made it impossible to identify whether it was Josh or Randy. The man disappeared from view for a while, then reappeared, made a purchase, and left the store. It's worth noting that this all happened at 4 p.m., while Michelle left work at 4:30 p.m. The police continued to analyze the footage and found that the pickup truck returned to the store several times over the next 30 minutes, but the driver didn't get out of the truck on these subsequent visits. The truck's final appearance near the store coincided with Michelle leaving work. Despite being unable to identify the suspect, the police tried to contact Randy Davis again. This time, he responded and came to the police station. The investigators informed Randy of his rights and made it clear that he was not under arrest. Randy agreed to cooperate and answer some questions. When asked about his activities on September 11th, Randy mentioned that he was going through a difficult divorce with his wife Michelle, with whom he had been married for 17 years. Randy claimed to have worked as a carpenter and was at work on the day of the incident. When questioned about his return time, Randy initially hesitated before stating that he arrived home at 3:45 p.m. However, this statement contradicted the surveillance footage and Josh's testimony, which indicated that Randy arrived home around 5:30 p.m. Randy further stated that he didn't leave his home after 3:45 p.m. and was home alone until Josh joined him to cook dinner together. However, this information conflicted with Josh's testimony, which stated that he was already home when Randy arrived. The alibis of Randy and Josh were intertwined, and investigators realized that one of them was not telling the truth. To test Randy's reaction, investigators informed him that Michelle had died from a bullet wound, not from injuries sustained in a car crash. Randy showed little reaction to this news, pretending to be surprised and lowering his eyes. When investigators asked him when he last saw Michelle, Randy requested a lawyer, which ended the conversation. The investigation was lacking in crucial evidence, including the weapon used to take Michelle's life, so Randy Davis was released. On September 15, 2008, Michelle's family and friends gathered to pay their respects at her funeral. Randy Davis attended the ceremony, putting on a show of grief, including bursting into tears. The investigators were working hard to find the answer. Unexpectedly, Josh Davis, Randy's son, walked into the police station with his lawyer and offered to make a statement. According to Josh, his father's car was parked in the driveway when he returned home from his sister. On September 11, 2008, Randy Davis committed a horrific act of violence. His wife, Michelle, had filed for divorce and was seeking part of the property in the divorce proceedings. Randy was unable to accept this and decided to take drastic measures. According to his son Josh, Randy had been planning this act of violence and had even told Josh that he was going to do something that would make Michelle regret it. Josh tried to stop his father, but Randy was determined to carry out his plan. Randy parked his red pickup truck outside the store where Michelle worked and waited for her to leave. He drove past the store several times, making sure not to miss the moment. When Michelle left work, Randy followed her and eventually found the right moment to strike. He rolled down the passenger side window and fired, shooting Michelle. Josh's testimony was crucial in the investigation, and the police were able to arrest Randy Davis based on the information he provided. The incident was also captured on the store's CCTV footage, which showed Randy's truck parked outside the store several times before the shooting. Randy Davis was initially charged with first-degree charges for the death of Michelle, but he made a deal to plead guilty to second-degree deprivation of life in exchange for a reduced sentence. As a result, Davis was sentenced to 50 years in prison in 2010.